All right. Hello, everyone. Afternoon. Welcome to the second half of day one. I'm Matt. I will be the voice that you will be having to deal with for the rest of the afternoon, so my condolences. So we'll start with a little bit of an opportunity to have post-lunch calisthenics and a chance for us to get a sense of how long people have been hanging out here. So we ask that anyone this is their first Code4Lib, stand up so that we can kind of give you a bit of an encouragement for the rest of the week. Welcome. All right, so now for the old hats, let's have anyone who's been here more than one time stand up, and we'll let you sit down. Stand as you're able, of course. So, all right, anybody who's been here, anyone who's been here through 3 times or more, stay standing. Anyone who's less, all right, 4, 5. All right, we're going to jump the numbers now. Anyone who's been here 10 or more Code4Libs, keep staying. All right, do we have any 15ers out there? All right, you all can sit down. Yeah, we'll get the Star Trek fight music later. That has to be off of YouTube so we don't get knocked off. But so now for actual announcement-y things, we again have our community support volunteers. They'll be in the back with the zebra-colored lanyards. It's Eric Fediplis and Natasha Allen for the 1 to 3 block, and then from 3 to 5 will be Andromeda Yelton and Luis O'Shea. And then for online, you have quite the gallery of folks to talk with. So if you have any concerns, just reach out to any of those folks. And as a reminder, all the Q&A for Zoom and YouTube will be done through the Slack channel, so make sure you go there with the link provided earlier today. And this conference wouldn't be possible without the local planning committee, so we want to list particular members of them for everybody to thank. So we'd like everyone to thank Anne-Marie Mesco, Esme Coles, Carrie Gordon, Jason Glenn, Alfredo Gonzalez Espinoza, Yingshui Li, Jolene Pastava, and Aaron Swift. All right. And again, there is a quiet room available. It's out to my left, your right, down the hall in the cook room on the right side. If you're looking to refill your water bottles, there is a filling station in the back corner that way. And if you have a use of the restrooms, they're out to my left, your right. There's a all-gender bathroom as well as a women's specific room right in a little bit of nook just down the hall. And a reminder for in-person presenters, we have both a PC and a Mac, and so everything should be loaded on a Dropbox on one of those. You can make your choice of either, but you will need to move the HDMI and the Ethernet cable between them as we go. And we'll help you get that set up. So from there, we now have our first talk of the afternoon. We'll set up our first talk of the afternoon. We're running a little ahead of time, which is replacing the legacy sites with low-maintenance, statistically hosted web archive-powered mirrors by Ilya Kramer And also, I apologize to any speakers if I mispronounce your name. I'm going to give it a good faith effort, but these things happen. All right. All right. Can you hear us?
Yes. Yep.
I don't think we can hear you, though.
Uh-oh. You can't hear me? I can try to start it now.
If you could keep speaking, we'll try and work out the audio issues on our end.
Okay. Okay. I can try restarting Zoom if you think it might be on our end.
Ilya, if you could keep speaking, so we can test the sound.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep speaking. Yes. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm continuing to speak. I'm hearing myself right now. But, yeah, it sounds like you still can't hear me. Seems like yeah, let me just restart Zoom.
Well, it's a good thing we're running early, so. Right. You guys can tell dumb jokes amongst yourselves.
Is this better?
Keep speaking, Ilya. Just keep speaking so we can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you guys.
Apparently the folks online can hear you, so we're just working it.
It worked before. I suppose it could be a lie. Used Zoom yesterday.
Get you to, there we go, continue speaking, please. Thank you.
Don't know what could have happened.
Are you unmuted across the board, Bronco? Yeah. We're trying to get something squared up on our end. Give us a moment. Apologies.
Yeah. Ilya, could you keep speaking because we need to
Sure, yes.
be able to test that.
Yeah, I'll keep speaking. Yes, I'm continuing to speak. Let me know if things change. I'm also hearing an echo of myself. Which is a little bit odd, but yeah, let me know what. Oops, did not mean to do that. Go back. Okay. Yeah, let me know if I should start or hello. Hello. Any luck?
Could you give me just a little bit more Ilya, please?
Sure. I'll keep talking. Hopefully we'll be able to figure it out. I could change something in Zoom or see this share sound option, which I haven't seen before. I checked that option, not sure if that makes any difference.
We need you to speak a bit more while we work this out. Keep speaking. Hopefully we'll be able to figure it out soon. And let me know as soon as we hear something. I'll keep just talking. Hey, we got you.
Yes? Yeah, okay,
Alright. Take it away, Ilya. You have 15 minutes.
Alright, thank you so much. Yeah, glad it worked. So I'm going to talk about replacing legacy sites with low maintenance statically hosted web archive powered mirrors. And so I'll get right into it. So briefly, what is web archiving? Probably a lot of you know already what that is, but just very quickly, archiving is the process of collecting portions of the web, preserving it in archival format, and storing archives for access and use at a later time. So that's according to the IAPC. And so at minimum, what this requires is capture, saving the HTTP network traffic, specifically the requests and responses from the existing site, and then storing it in an archival format, and then also providing a way to access those archives again. And by that we mean replaying the archive HTTP responses when URL is requested in the browser. And yeah, so very briefly about me and about Web Recorder. So I started the Web Recorder project. Our motto is web archiving for all. We create and maintain free and open source web archiving tools. And by that I mean tools to capture archives in high fidelity, so all the interactive parts of websites, including all the JavaScript, are kind of exactly what's loaded in the browser. We also maintain a format called WAC-Z, which is a portable format for loading web archives. And then we also have tools to access and view archives directly in the browser. And all these tools are sort of part of the process of creating a web archive mirror. So very briefly, I'll kind of run through these tools. So we have Biotrix Crawler, which is a capture tool for creating WAC-Z files automatically. We have Archive Web Page, which is a browser extension for manually creating web archives. Then we have Replay Web Page, which is the viewer tool, so it can view WAC-Z files. And then we have Webpack.js, which is a low-level service worker library for loading archives in the browser. And then, yeah, so here's sort of a high-level overview. We have the Archive Web Page and Browsertrix. They create archives in a format called WAC-Z. Then we have Replay Web Page, which loads from WAC-Z format and provides a way to view archives. Then the Web Archive Powered Mirror is built on top of the system, so that's sort of the next way to extend that. Very briefly, what is WAC-Z format? It's a zip file. It bundles a bunch of other stuff, including work files, which is another web archive format, along with indices and some metadata. It can also be cryptographically signed. The main takeaway for the WAC-Z format is that basically it's a way to provide random access efficiently to archive data by URL using HTTP range requests, so that essentially you could load one HTML page or one image from a multi-gigabyte WAC-Z file very quickly without downloading the whole thing. And that's sort of the key part of making this work. Yeah, so now kind of taking a step back, how are web archives accessed traditionally? So the typical approach is something like the Wayback Machine, where there's essentially an archival URL that you include the site that you want to load, like example.com, or with Replay Web Page, we have it embedded in a similar way. We have replayweb.page, then the URL that you're loading from the web archive. And this works great for many use cases. If you want to embed an archive in an iframe, that's another use case. If you want to just have a central archive repository somewhere. And then now I'm going to talk about what is a web archive powered mirror. And the approach here is that we actually just have a static website consisting of just HTML and JavaScript and WAC-Z files. And really all the magic happens in service workers, which are a standard web technology that allows intercepting any request, a domain, and handling directly in the browser. And service workers were designed initially for progressive web apps, offline cache, and they're widely supported in all browsers now. And so the idea is that, let's say you have myarchive.example.org, which is a mirror of my original site, .example.edu, and when you load myarchive.example.org's some page, the service worker intercepts this request and dynamically fetches the URL for my original site, example.edu/. And that's sort of the idea, is that an entire domain is configured as a mirror of another domain, or it could actually be the original site. And so why you might want to do this, first, your site can be archived, so that's the first requirement. If it can't, then there's not much we can do. You still want to keep the site on its original domain, or you might move it to a new domain that you control. but not updated. You want to keep all the relative links or even the absolute links intact, working as they are. You want to move away from complex hosting and reduce costs. Or perhaps the original site was controlled by someone else who may want to take it down, such as an institution or even the federal government. And so so this is basically how the idea is that the original site might be something more complicated, running on a CMS, WordPress, Drupal, etc., and controlled by someone else, and you want to still host the site with all the links in with the same structure preserved, and you can host it as a static site with a web archive-powered mirror. If you have access to the original site, you could you still use the original domain, or you could use a different domain if you don't. And so, sort of how does this work? What's the anatomy of this? So we have a template repository, GitHub here, and essentially the way this works is that initially there's a sort of the starting page that's needed to bootstrap the mirror. Key part is there's a 404 HTML, basically a 404 catch-all handler that allows catching any request. And what it does is it works just as the index in HTML. It configures the service worker and then loads the archive page. And then we have the init script, the service worker itself, a one-liner script to configure the archive, an optional banner, and of course the WAXI file itself that contains the archive. And so how do you create a single site mirror entirely on GitHub? First you start with a WAXI file, can be from archive web page or browser tricks. If you have a work file, you could use the PyWaxi tool to package work to WAXI. You could fork in your repository from our GitHub template, upload the WAXI file somewhere. It could be added to the GitHub repo directly. You may need to configure course settings if hosted elsewhere. And then really there's just this one-liner config that we have that you point the WAXI file where's the data coming from and the original site. And then the service worker will essentially take care of the rest. And so it could be hosted on a different domain, or it could be hosted on the original domain. It actually doesn't matter. In this case, it should work on both circumstances. And yeah, so an example of this I wanted to share is a mirror of Dr. Amanda Visconti's Infinite Ulysses, which originally hosted on ulysses.com. And so this is what the original looks like now, and this is the web archive hosted mirror. Essentially, and I can even, currently it's cached, but I open it into Windows. So initially, there's kind of an interstitial page where it initializes the service worker and the archive, and then it loads the original, or it loads the page. And so now as I click around, all of this is loaded from the service worker that's serving that web archive. And it works, essentially, in this case, it works better than the original site because the original site has degraded for whatever reason. And this site is hosted off of GitHub pages here on this. So basically, just configured it to point to the WAXI file that's hosted in this repo and the original site. So that's sort of the simple, and this can be applied to any site that's been archived. Very quickly, just wanted to share that that's a single site archive. We can actually extend this to multi-domain archives, and we've done this with govarchive.us, where we actually have archives of several federal government sites that have been taken down, and we extend this by having essentially using subdomains to represent different domains. So, for example, epa.gov becomes epa.govarchive.us, and all these we replace the dot with a dash, make it a little bit more easy to support, and yeah, and then we use wildcard DNS to point to. So this is a little bit more than just GitHub pages, but it works in the same way. Yeah, and that's the basic idea. So you could start with a single site archive, and you can extend it to multiple sites as needed. Yeah, and there's some quick resources I can share more. There's the starter repo, a blog post about govarchive.us, and the original, yeah, and more information on our blog post. And happy to answer any more questions later. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Ilya. We'll let you go, and folks can catch Ilya in the Slack or contact him directly.
Yeah, I'll be in the Slack.
All right. And we'll head over to our next talk, which is in person this time. Tales from the Online Archives of California Replatforming by Chad Nelson and Amy Victka.
Thank you.
Did you have a...
Yeah. Okay. This? That's it. What do I do? What do I do? Which? Which one? From beginning? All right. Hello, Code4Lib. I'm Chad Nelson.
I'm Amy Wieliczka.
And today we are going to tell you a story about the Online Archive of California and how we replatformed it. OAC, as we like to call the Online Archive of California. We want to tell you this story, but we need to kind of set the stage for you. And if there's one image that you should keep in your mind when you think about what the old Online Archive of California was, it would be a shark. It was a highly efficient, incredibly specialized beast of a system. It evolved over more than 20 years, and what it did incredibly efficiently. But it was also full of sharp teeth that you could cut yourself on. It was built on XTF, an unmaintained open access platform that our own organization had created years ago, but no one built, full of mountains of XSLT, Java vendor Java so old that it could vote, no config management, no automated deployment systems, and no real tests. Even the ingestion system for OAC was called Voro, and that comes from the Latin meaning like to devour, to always focus on one kind of thing to eat, like omnivore or finding aid avore in this case. How do I slide this down? Do I see more of my notes? Like that? Oh, there we go. And OAC, much like a shark, inspired fear every time we had to make a change. We'd make a update, restart the server, and cross our fingers that nothing broke. So it's something we didn't do very often. But it just kept swimming along, doing its thing, as it always had, and in some ways we assumed it always would. All right. So with that idea in mind, let's tell you a little bit more about ourselves. So we are from the California Digital Library, which is part of the University of California system. OAC is managed by the archives team of the Publishing, Archives, and Digitization program. We run a few other things, including Calisphere, which is a statewide aggregation service for digital objects, when you'll see a bunch of images from that service in our slides coming up. But what is OAC? It is a aggregation of more than 70,000 finding aids from over 350 archival institutions across California. If you don't know what a finding aid is, it's a representation of an archival collection in a way that makes it easier for a researcher and a user to kind of understand what is there and get a high-level view of it. So finding aids are often represented as EAD, encoded archival description, but one thing that's been part of OAC from the beginning for many, many years, for the almost 20 years it's been running, is also accepting MARC records as for EAD and even document-based records via something we call Record Express. And that's because we don't just work with large institutions, university libraries and their archives. We also work with small one-person shops where they don't have the resources to build that. And we wanted that part of the California archival institutions to be represented just as well inside of OAC. So we did a lot of work to make that happen. So as I said, we've been running it for almost 20 years, and it seemed like it would just keep doing what it did. But that idea kind of broke for us finally when we realized it was the last system we needed to figure out how to migrate off a dying operating system. It was very well adapted to the system it was running in, but would it do so well in a new environment? Now remember, no configuration management, no tests, and none of the staff members who had originally built it were still around. So the idea of moving it onto another system was daunting. It wasn't just daunting, it was kind of scary, because not only did we did our users use it, like they depended on it in some ways. They linked very deeply into the old site. Their reading room procedures involved referencing parts of OAC. For many of our institutions, this was the only online representation of their finding aids, so they didn't have another place to go to. And so if we made big changes, it would disrupt not just our own organization, but 350 institutions possibly. But it was also scary for me as a manager because it was the type of work that was going to be a slog to just migrate an old piece of technical debt onto a new system. I mean, nothing brings me joy more than working for months and months and finding myself in the exact same place I was at the beginning. So it wasn't something anyone was really looking forward to. So staring into the jaws of the team being forced through several months of slog, an idea was floated to replace the old system. There was fear in those conversations, but there was also excitement and enthusiasm. People thought, oh, we could actually move forward instead of have this old system that we were kind of that just did what it had always done. We recognized it was a very tight timeline for such a big lift, but we felt like we understood the domain very well, and we had some recent work that we could build on. And to be honest, there was a real benefit to having a real deadline in place, this deadline for an end of life of the OS. It meant that we couldn't just push back that deadline. It was going to force us to make really hard prioritization choices about what it means to be, what was actually required for a minimum viable product. We'd actually have to lean on those agile-like processes that we've been applying for years when we had squishy deadlines that were self-imposed. And at the heart of the entire process, there was this idea that we would really want to communicate to contributors and users. The MVP wouldn't be the end of the line for the development. The old system, which was feature-rich, had ossified, a sort of living fossil, still propelled by the momentum of its previous successes. Our focus was going to be on developing a living system that we could maintain and grow.
So early on, we chose to use ArcLight. This choice did two important things for us. It solved a major part of the puzzle quickly. We get a user-friendly search and EAD UI for free. EADs are endlessly, recursively complex, and now, rather than analyzing and recreating OAC's display layer, we simply inherit a web application designed by a community we trust to display the highly flexible and abstract data model of EAD. Amazing. The choice to use ArcLight also helped define the shape of the other puzzle pieces in Relief. ArcLight is specific about using solar, so our index technology was picked for us. ArcLight also provides traject tooling to perform the mapping from EAD file to solar schema. Otherwise, though, ArcLight's pretty unopinionated about the management or hosting of EAD files, where they live and how they make their journey to solar, how and when they are consumed. If OAC is a shark, ArcLight is really only a metabolic system, capable of transforming EADs into usable fuel, but lacking any hunting or hunger instincts. Our team has broad expertise in Django, a Python web application framework, and Airflow, a workflow management system. So we decided to build our contributor dashboard for finding aid management in Django, and we built workflows in Airflow to index those finding aids to stage and later prod. This architecture allows each piece to do a significant chunk of work while also maintaining flexibility by establishing clear boundaries, operational concerns, and interfaces between parts. Each part is supported by well-known open source technologies and can be worked on independently or together, depending on what makes sense. We decided to put everything together in one mono repo, which keeps relevant code proximal, but we develop and deploy to separate containers using Docker Compose locally and deploying on ECS Fargate. We also chose to lean pretty heavily on our existing AWS toolkit since we're already pretty bought in across CDL. We use S3 and RDS for data storage, Textract SQS and manage workflows with Apache Airflow for data processing, CloudFront for web application caching, and CodeBuild and Fargate throughout the entire system for deploying and running containerized web app servers and one-off processes. So to describe the general data flow, there we go. Finding aids are uploaded and created in the dashboard. The dashboard on certain events will trigger an indexing workflow in Airflow, which orchestrates running a traject job in an ArcLight container as a one-off process. Airflow not only spins up this ArcLight task container, but also manages the state of the job and will report back any failures or errors in the process. The ArcLight task container runs traject, which ingests the finding aid into Solr so that the ArcLight server containers can now serve up the new static finding aid. So with a sprint process defined and an architecture pretty clearly sketched out, we jump in. It's a joy to work within a proper sprint process, building something fresh, attached to recreating the feature set of OAC, but not shackled to migrating it exactly. We started with EAD management and built the Django application first, something we know very well, and then the data pipeline in Airflow. Early on, we knew we needed to add support for record express records, a quick and simple form contributors can fill out to generate an EAD, supporting only a subset of the EAD spec. We also know we needed to add support for managing supplementary PDF files and their full text extraction to allow search on the contents of these PDFs. The sprint process allows us to be a bit principled about our technical decisions and explorations as well. As a team, we are coalescing around containerized applications and writing infrastructure as code. The project, with its multiple web applications, became a fantastic use case for our dev team to hone our infrastructure templates. As we started deploying everything, the contributor dashboard, the data pipeline, and an out-of-the-box ArcLight instance, we start to realize the vision. There are some adjustments to be made in the interfaces between each component, but largely the pipeline just works. We have a set of parts running together that manage to handle all the things we think it needs to. In the process, we've developed a deeper understanding of the complexity the OAC monolith was hiding. And at this point, we're pretty convinced we've managed to replicate the most critical parts of that complexity in our new system without the technical debt and code complexity that came with the old OAC. We did deprioritize ArcLight development since it gave us so much out of the box. But as the deadline for launch loomed closer, we shifted our focus to ArcLight and the pressure started to mount. As a team, we really lack Ruby and Rails expertise. A handful of larger UI tweaks get scrapped altogether. Small UI tweaks take much longer than anticipated. Rails magic is difficult to reason about as a newcomer to a fully formed codebase. The way ArcLight swims upstream against the standard Rails model by using Solr as its primary data store instead of a relational database makes all the standard Rails tutorials difficult to follow and apply to ArcLight. Simultaneously, our initial inclination to run multiple Solr containers, one writer, multiple readers talking to the same file system, in order to distribute load without having to run a full Solr Cloud and Zookeeper installation, turns out to be more complex than initially thought due to a pesky lock file. We go on a detour to understand replication better and do ultimately achieve a single-leader, multi-follower containerized infrastructure. There's one very large UI tweak we absolutely cannot scrap. We know our users depend on static finding aids, which ArcLight does not support out of the box. Static finding aids are what we call a complete representation of the entire finding aid and its hierarchical contents on a single printable page. Traversing this hierarchy in Solr and recursively rendering it in ArcLight proved to be an extremely complicated performance challenge, especially for a team lacking Rails expertise. We also have finding aids expressed in Mark that we need to ingest. We won't sacrifice these Mark finding aids in the upgrade, but ArcLight's out-of-the-box traject mapping is designed for EADs only. As we approach the deadline, we are racing to ingest these Mark files and write a traject mapping from Mark to our Solr schema.
And then we reach the deadline, or the endpoint, and we launch, and everything gets bad. Really, really bad. For users, the public-facing site is loading incredibly slowly. Searches are returning errors. Users and contributors are complaining. University librarians are reaching out to our director to escalate the issue, which is exactly what you want 3 days after you launch your new system. On the back end, Solr's bouncing up and down over and over again. ArcLight containers are getting killed minutes after they boot up. Looking at the logs, the bot traffic is outrageous. While we had load tested on the known URLs for the new system, the bots were sending requests for all kinds of old URL patterns from our old system, from 20 years of known URLs. And it turned out that those unknown URLs were really expensive. They were causing Solr to really spend a long time looking for things, and it was causing serious trouble. We started blocking traffic, but the more and more we started blocking bot traffic, but the more and more we tried, the more we found more things in the system that just didn't show up unless it was under the scale of traffic that the bots were throwing at us. It took us almost a full week to finally get to a place where we felt like the site was stable and everyone could use it the way they expected to. And at that point, we had serious doubts. Was it hubris to think that we could replace this system that had developed over 20 years in 7 months? Was it foolish to think that we could build features in a new to us open source tool that the community had not yet taken on? And in some ways, yes, it was. But there's no way we would have actually taken on this project without a little bit of that hubris. Everyone was scared of this thing for so long, and no one wanted to touch it, and we kind of just had to jump in with both feet. So if we hadn't had a little bit of hubris, we'd still be swimming with that shark. And then after a little bit of time, we started to realize that if we just judged our success on that first week, we would have forgotten the central idea that we wanted contributors and users to understand. Our focus was on developing a system we could maintain and grow.
Ultimately, an intense focus on making it easy to evolve the application saved us. Our baseline automated testing and automated deployment process allowed us to push out updates to try potential fixes quickly. We were able to iterate on changes to Solr and ArcLight together and independently. While we succumbed to using the AWS console for making infrastructural tweaks and updates, we captured these changes in our infrastructure as code, which has become a living configuration document. Since launch in August of 2025, we've made 37 releases to the front end, the dashboard, data processing, and infrastructure. That's an average of 5 releases per month. So now, 6 months out, we want to engage in an honest assessment of what it means to build something new using community tools. ArcLight, Django, and Airflow literally enabled this project to happen. I've worked with Django and Airflow for a long time, and there are a few key reasons I keep coming back to them. Both have very opinionated domain modeling, but are not so opinionated about how the pieces are put together. Django's domain is web applications, and Django provides relevant and useful abstractions, views, routes, templates, data models situated within a well-crafted ORM, middleware, and authentication. Ultimately, these can all be cobbled together in a variety of ways to achieve a wide range of web app features. Similarly, Airflow's domain is workflow management, and it provides abstractions like tasks, operators, schedules, DAGs, Airflow's name for a workflow, job statuses, and upstream and downstream task relationships. These two can be cobbled together in perhaps too many different ways to describe and orchestrate a wide range of workflows. Along a spectrum from useful open source abstractions and frameworks to full-fledged but customizable open source applications, Airflow starts to move a bit closer to fully fledged application. It ships with a ready-built UI and is designed to be both used and built with. Out-of-the-box Django, by contrast, is pretty meaningless. It doesn't really do much of anything except verify that the dev server is running. ArcLight, on the other hand, sits on the other end of this spectrum, primarily designed to be used, shipping out of the box with almost everything you'd want. Library software often sits on this end of the spectrum, and necessarily so. Many libraries don't have developer staff to spend time cobbling together helpful abstractions, no matter how helpful. But this project really made me appreciate how much easier it is to build something up with useful abstractions than it is to make modifications to an entrenched, fully fledged application I don't quite understand.
Zooming out even a little further, we're very cautious about our use of open source. Like, we were bitten by the shark that was XTF, something that we built internally to our own organization. And we didn't want to find ourselves in that position again. So ArcLight, which was so central to our work in this project, carries a lot of risks for us. Like, it is our only place we're using Rails. It's the only place we're using Solar. Are we going to be able to meaningfully contribute back upstream to the project in a way that benefits both us and the community? Is the fact that it allowed us to move very quickly going to be a guarantee that it will allow us to go far with it? We're not sure. It's a thing that we are going to keep in mind, working with the community and working with our own project and making that decision. But it's definitely a thing to keep in mind because, as we said, we don't just want the individual project to be maintainable. We need the entire ecosystem to be maintainable. So that's the end of our story. And I want to leave you with one last image that we think sums up what we hope we built. And that is everyone's favorite, the balloon siphonophore, which there's just one little bit in that text that I love. This creature consists of a colony of individual animals, each of them adapted so as to provide a specific function in the life of the colony. Hopefully, we've built a colony of OAC, and it's going to last for a while. Thank you very much, and thank you, Code4Lib.
All right. And as soon as I can find this cursor, we can move on to our next talk. So many windows to close. Well, you guys didn't need to hear that anyway. So our next talk is Digital Preservation from Scratch by Natasha Fisher, who will be joining us remotely, and hopefully with 100% less audio issues as I jinx us. Hello, Natasha. Can you hear us?
Hello.
All right. Sounds good. And you're good to go.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natasha. I am a digital archivist at the Archives HQ, which is Canada's US LGBTQIA archive. And I'm excited to be here. It's my first time at Code4Lib and my second conference presentation ever, so I'm not nervous at all. I've come to you virtually as one of your friendly and concerned neighbors to the north. I'm based in Montreal, Canada. And I got my master's in information studies here in Montreal, where I have a lot of best practices for archival studies and digital preservation, which sort of went out the window at a small community archive with limited funding. So today I want to talk about implementing digital preservation from scratch. When I started at the archive, I was tasked with implementing digital preservation, which is daunting. But just like making something from scratch, if you go step by step, you eventually arrive at a wonderful pastry. But unfortunately, we did not have any recipes, any roadmap. So this talk will be about where do you start if you need to implement digital preservation and you're not sure how to get started. So a little bit about myself. I have a background in search engine, and now this is more on digital preservation and web archiving. I've mostly been doing that work at small community archives. I've been in the archives with you for about a year, almost a year, and I've also started a small community archive myself for a roller derby team here in Canada. And today is to make digital preservation feel achievable, no matter what organization you're at, what resources you have or don't have, and how to get started if you're starting from scratch, like we did. So some quick background on the archives, because I will be using it as a case study to explain the work I've done there. So as the archive of the Q and Canada's 2S VPQI archive, our mandate is to acquire, preserve, and make accessible queer materials in any medium. We have a focus on materials in Canada, and we are the largest queer archive in Canada, as well as the largest independent queer archive in the world. And we are a community archive by nature, and we just celebrated our 50th anniversary, which is nothing short of a miracle for a community archive, honestly. And it's only possible because of our very dedicated volunteers and staff and community. And community archives, so we're an independent community archive, which means we are not organized or funded, unfortunately, by a university or government agency or anything like that. So it often means we have to be very scrappy, and we have to balance best practices with realism. So what I want, and then just quickly about our collection to give you an overview. We have limited resources, but our collection is quite large. We have around 100,000 items in our reference collection. We have around 28,000 titles in our library. We have 200 described fonts in our archives, and we have around 7,000 artifacts and pieces of art as well in a lot of different mediums. So we have a pretty substantial collection, and over the past 20 years or so, we've been creating digital surrogates for all of these materials, which has been accumulating into a large digital collection. And it's led us to this question of how do we protect and manage all of our digital surrogates? And spoiler alert, the answer is digital preservation. But I wanted to quickly get us all on the same page of what do we mean by digital preservation and what exactly are we talking about there. So first of all, I think there's often this misconception that once something is online, once it's digital, it is there forever. It can always be accessed. But digital materials, I would argue, are actually some of the most fragile materials that we handle in archives. They face a lot of different challenges. First of all, hardware and software obsolescence. I think if any of us were handed a floppy disk now, it would be challenging to get the information off of that medium. And that's something that, isn't quite that old. We've had so many changes in physical media over the last 60 years. So the obsolescence of hardware and software and finding machines that are compatible to read all of the different file formats we have is getting more and more difficult. We also have just good old human error is always a risk. We have files being altered, moved, deleted, either on purpose or not on purpose, especially at a community archive like ours, where we have maybe controversial material. We are always aware of human malicious intent. There's natural disaster, just like in physical archives. If our hard drives get flooded, we will lose all of our data. We could accidentally import a virus with one of our ingests and corrupt all of the accompanying files. Bit rot, just sort of a fancy term for file corruption. When one of your bits in a digital file flips from a 1 to a 0, it can corrupt a piece or all of your file. So all of that to say really that all of that to stress the fragility of digital materials and the importance of preserving them. So what exactly is digital preservation then? How do we preserve these digital materials? I really like this definition from the Digital Preservation Coalition, which calls it the series of managed activities necessary to ensure continued access to digital materials for as long as necessary. So it's a little bit jargony, so we're just going to break it down step by step. So the series of managed activities is just to say it's not one action that you do and then you have done digital preservation. It's a whole suite of activities that work together. That might mean migrating a file from a Word perfect document to a PDF. It might mean running virus checks, digitizing materials, working on your metadata, your cybersecurity. So it's a whole environment of activities that need to work together. And they need to work together in order to ensure long-term access. That's the overall goal of digital preservation. And continued access to digital materials, which is pretty self-explanatory. But sometimes we forget that that can include websites, emails. For libraries, that might be ebooks, documents, electronic theses. And ensuring continued access to those digital materials for as long as necessary, which for us at the archives means normally in perpetuity, but it could also include deaccessioning if that's part of your process. So digital preservation, so we're all on the same page, is the series of managed activities necessary to ensure continued access to digital materials for as long as necessary. And just some other quick jargon, because I feel these terms are thrown around a lot. There are sort of two pathways to arrive at a digital file. They can either be born digitally, so that's really what we work with most of the time nowadays. A file that originates digitally and doesn't have an analog equivalent, like an email, like this PowerPoint presentation. And that is as opposed to a digital surrogate, which was originally an analog material, which has been converted through digitization into a digital surrogate. So that would be, for example, a WAV file of a digitized audio cassette tape. So they both lead to the same place, which is a digital file, which then we put into the digital preservation environment. And another quick clarification, because I hear this one a lot in my workplace, which is that digitization equals digital preservation, which is not necessarily true. Digitization is just the action of capturing a digital surrogate. So for example, here is one of our very fancy digitization setups for capturing books and periodicals. So that is taking an image of a book, digitizing it, but that is only one step of the digital preservation environment, which includes all of those managed activities that we talked about briefly. So just to say, not to conflate the two, digital preservation is sort of the umbrella term under which digitization falls. So now how exactly do we implement digital preservation from scratch? That was the question when I started my new position here at the archives as the first digital archivist. And it was a bit daunting, but here are my first 6 steps that I would recommend for implementing digital preservation. Some of it might sound straightforward, but when you're starting and you have no roadmap, it's sort of difficult to figure out where to start and what order to do things in. And I feel something that would have been really helpful for us was a case study of this process from a small community archive like ours. So I'm hoping that this can be a little bit of an example. Hopefully, if anyone is in a similar position, hopefully this will give you some places to start. So we're going to start with taking inventory, assessing our capabilities as an archive or a library, assessing our digitization capacities, figuring out our digitization priorities, putting in place a digital preservation policy, and assessing if we need a digital preservation system. So first of all, the most basic question, which was surprisingly difficult to answer, was what do we have and where is it? So taking inventory of all the digital materials you have in your organization. This was raising questions like, what files do we have? What file formats are they in? Where are they? And the way I went about answering these questions was really just poking around our archive, asking questions, finding this beautiful cardboard box full of unlabeled hard drives, figuring out what was on them. And a tool that was really, really useful for this for us was creating a digital asset register. And there's a really great resource from the Digital Preservation Coalition, which is called a DAR, Digital Asset Register Toolkit, which I've linked here below, on how to build what is essentially a fancy spreadsheet that lists every digital material you have and just accompanying metadata, whatever you feel is important for your organization. So this is a screenshot of ours. It's basically the location, the name, and a description of every digital file that we have in the archive. Its status, how many files are in that folder, the size, and some other data which we aren't sharing here, but this is kind of after a few iterations. We originally were also including like what file types they were, but that ended up not being useful. So it's a very customizable option or customizable sheet system. But this was a really important and big first step for us, was just figuring out what we have and where it is and recording that. So step one, taking inventory. Assessing your capabilities, so taking sort of a look at what elements you already have in place, what needs to be improved, what needs to be implemented from scratch. And this can be done with the Digital Preservation Coalition's rapid assessment model, which I've also linked below, which goes through 12 really important and sort of just fundamental elements of digital preservation, everything from really technical aspects to things like policy, access, IT, everything like that. And at the end, it will give you this beautiful graph of where you are now in your digital preservation capacity and where you want to be. And from there, you can start building your strategy of what you need to focus on first. And I'm realizing I'm running a little bit behind, so we'll go a little bit faster, but I'm always happy to take questions later about any of these things. So next would be assessing your digitization capabilities. What can you digitize in-house? What machines do you have? Do they work? Do you know how to use them? If not, maybe what external digitization vendors do we want to use? And do we have policies in place for sending those materials off-site? For us, this was setting up a digital lab in our archives, which I'm so proud of, and we just finished putting up these beautiful pegboards, so I wanted to include a photo of it. So for us, this involved setting up like 4 specific workstations that have the capacity to digitize different types of materials, and creating procedures for each of those types of materials, and just getting sort of your digitization lab in place. Then deciding what you will be digitizing, which we based on the priority of the subject matter of our materials, the research value of those materials, what level of degradation they were facing, and if they were last copy or not, which we analyzed in this just basic spreadsheet of all of those elements to decide on our top 12, I believe, top 17 collections and fall that we'll be digitizing in the next 2 years. And I'll just rush through the last 2. Next was implementing a digital preservation policy. So we wrote this whole policy from scratch. We already had, luckily, like an accession policy, preservation policy, but this one specifically, we looked at things like the environmental impacts of digital preservation, how we will be providing access to these materials, how we will be securing them, how we'll be using AI or not using AI in our case. And that policy will be available on our website if you want to use it as an example or take a look. And finally, if you want to, if you can, implement a digital preservation system. Maybe you've used them or heard of them. A lot of the popular ones are Preservica, Archivematica, and it's sort of a whole managed environment where you can upload your materials and they'll be managed by the system. They'll be migrated to more recent formats. They'll be checked for viruses. They'll be checked for fixity. And in our case, we've finally landed on one. We'll be implementing Preservica, but that is something we are just starting. So that will maybe be the next presentation on how implementing a system like that goes for a small community archive. But following those first 6 steps have gotten us to a at least manageable level of digital preservation where we know what we have, we know where it is, and we know how we're going to keep it safe. So for us, from scratch did not necessarily mean perfect, but it means doing what you can with the resources you have and just continually improving until you find something that works. And hopefully some of those are good starting points if you're interested in digital preservation. And yeah, I think that's all my time, so I'll end there, but thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your conference.
Thank you, Natasha. And everybody can ask questions on the Slack. And now, next up, we have Peter Serta and a few other folks potentially. Okay, just Peter then.
Hello, I am Peter Serta. I am a data curation specialist with the Deep Blue Repository and Research Data Services team. Oh, of course, sorry, apologies for that. Yeah, so I work for the Deep Blue Repository and Research Data Services team at the University of Michigan Library. And what that means is that we help manage our repositories that the library hosts. In this case, I'll be talking a lot about Deep Blue Documents, which is U of M's institutional repository. So we host a lot of human consumable content, such as articles, books, chapters, presentations, posters, etc. And one of our big collections is actually our dissertations and theses collections, which has about 54,000 items. And this is just a screenshot of our landing page at Deep Blue Documents. So since 2007, dissertations have been born digital and uploaded to Deep Blue Documents as part of the requirement for graduation from our graduate school. And these are uploaded with the intent of being open access either immediately or placed under a short-term embargo, meaning it's restricted to the U of M community or to no one at all until it's released from that embargo. But prior to 2007, dissertations were actually required to be printed and submitted to RAC, which would then, our graduate school, which would then deposit them into the University of Michigan Library. So over time, the university microfilms, and which I believe became ProQuest, digitized older print copies, and U of M Library was able to acquire those digitized copies and preserve them in Deep Blue Documents. But because these were uploaded after the fact and the authors didn't really have an idea that their dissertations were going to be made available digitally, older dissertations are actually restricted to the U of M community only. And the way we think about this is it's akin to going to the library and accessing a print copy rather than, so it's only restricted to folks that have a UMich email or are physically at the library. So dissertations are actually one of our most highly used content. And across the world, we actually see that a lot of our dissertations are accessed, downloaded, especially from lower to middle income countries. And we are very proud of that. But there are quite a few that are under those restrictions. So when we get a request for access to these historical dissertations, what we actually have to do is reach out to the author if possible, which turns us into internet sleuths. Hopefully we can find that email, sometimes we don't. And then we can investigate the copyright status. Does this dissertation have a copyright notice on the front matter? If it does, it stays restricted. If it does not, then we are able to open access as the dissertation can be considered in public domain. And this is a lot of the work that myself and Rachel Woodberg, a colleague, do. But that's a lot of legwork, and this is on demand, essentially. So we started to talk about if there was a possibility for us to develop an automated workflow to assess the copyright status for historical dissertations. Is there a way that we can develop a script, some pipeline, some workflow that actually go in and do this for us, so we can make more things openly accessible? And when I say we, I really mean Aurelia Haddock, our student intern, who is way more capable at programming than we are. And what she did was develop a automatic workflow in Python that will basically, we feed it a batch of PDFs, dissertation PDFs, and it will go in for each PDF, extract the first and last 15 pages. It will check if the PDF already contains searchable text, if it has a text layer. If it does, it's going to scan for copyright-related phrases. And if it does not, it's going to OCR, or optical character recognition, the text, and then scans for those phrases. And because OCR quality can vary, it also includes fuzzy matching to detect varied copyright phrases. Then it gives us a nice output that gives us the file name, copyright status, and a yes, no, what method was used, and if the what copyright notice was found, if any. So because we're not going to throw this at the entire batch, we wanted to do some testing on it, and we actually found that it was 99.77% accurate. So 2 out of 853 were incorrect. But importantly, those incorrect dissertations were actually false positives. So in this case, our Aurelia script actually it did find copyright, it just not the right way. So in this case, we found this to be highly successful because we are totally okay with keeping a false positive restricted. We are not okay with releasing a false negative, meaning that there is a copyright that the script did not find. So we decided, okay, this is good enough. We got the okays from all the higher ups, and then we ran this on over 13,000 dissertations from 1929 to 1977. And we were able to verify that there are over 8,000 historical dissertations that we can release to make fully open access. In addition to that, we are actually able to identify 1,500 dissertations that we can go in and look at to make sure if it does or does not have a copyright statement due to some use of copyright, the word copyright in some title pages that Progress or UMI used. And you can find the code, it's available at Deep Blue Data, our other repository, if you follow this DOI link. So just in quick conclusion, we've already started to see a decreased number of access requests, which is great because hopefully that, correlation doesn't mean causation, but we like to think that this is making our work a little bit more accessible. It really does help support that open access and making this work, especially historical dissertations that are really highly used, available to everyone, not just folks at U of M. And one of the little warnings that we saw is that OCR quality is going to only be as good as the scan quality. So here's just an example of a copyright statement that is from a very horrible scan. Obviously, the OCR gave us back a jumbled mess of special characters. So we pulled that batch out. But we're already starting to see that these are causing similar issues when we're starting to talk about accessibility remediation and accessibility with a capital A. So this is something that we're starting to become more aware about, especially as the accessibility deadline is creeping up. So with that, if I have any time for questions, I'll happily take them. If not, you can email me at pacert@umich.edu or our team email, and I'll also be looking at the Slack if you have any questions. Thank you.
we're at about time, unfortunately, because we're running a little late. So thank you, Peter. And as noted, you can reach out to Peter directly. And so next up, as we close a bunch of windows, is Clark Yakavakis. Thank you. And I'll let him just introduce his own talk. Yeah.
Thanks. Testing. Can you hear me? I'll pick it up. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Clark Yakavakis, and I'm going to talk to you today about research information management systems. So a little bit about myself. I'm the Scholarly Services Librarian at Oklahoma State University. I'm also the lead administrator for they're called RIM systems, Research Information Management, which we call Experts Directory. I've been working in the area. I started my career in reference and instruction, and I've been working in Scalcom, open access, copyright since about 2013. And all of this background, I think, has really laid a good foundation for me to be able to do this kind of work. And one of my themes here is that this kind of work is really in alignment with library and archives, and it's really interesting and worthwhile to look into. So what these systems do is they aggregate, curate, link together institutional metadata. And what I mean by that is publications, grants, courses, service activities, facilities, equipment, and that sort of thing. And for either a specific institution or a group of institutions, like a system or a regional or state, or there are even nationwide RIM systems outside of the US. And what these serve as a single point of access for data that's typically spread across multiple systems, either outside the university or within the university, that have varying levels of tidiness and access, and they pool them all together into a single data source. The term research information has stuck, even though, like I said, it's really not representative of the kinds of information that you can find in these systems, which include these things that I mentioned earlier. Different usages for this kind of data, they can be repurposed and used in faculty activity reporting. They can feed public profiles for expertise discovery. The metadata in the systems can be reused and repurposed in other ways, including doing analytics and visualizations. They can integrate with institutional repositories, which I'll talk about more in just a moment. And they can be used for compliance things, for grants and that sort of thing. So at Oklahoma State, we use a system called Symplectic Elements. There's a number of others, including open source options. And we began implementing in 2019. There was some top-down pressure with the associate deans and the vice president for research wanting better able to track what research was going on across the university. But also faculty and even staff and students are heavy users of this system to be able to see what's going on campus, who's specializing in what areas, and find collaborators and that sort of thing. And also the brand management and communications teams were interested in a system that they didn't have to, consistently update static faculty web pages. And so the library stepped forward and said, hey, not only do we have the expertise in metadata management, but it intersects with a lot of other aspects of library work that we're really interested in, like open access, bibliometrics, and that sort of thing. So this system has a few feeds that are external to the university, like PubMed, Crossref, Scopus, to bring in publications metadata. But then we have 3 feeds that run regularly to pull in personnel information, externally funded grants, and courses taught. Our primary use case is expertise discovery. So at experts.okstate.edu, you can see our public profiles. This gets an enormous amount of traffic from all over the world. I run our support page, and so I see some of the queries that come in, and it really is people like with a sick horse somewhere in Scandinavia trying to get in touch with a vet med specialist for a particular ailment. So it has an enormous reach, and we have a few other use cases as well. So now I'd like to take you into a few aspects of the architecture and a couple of use cases. So there's an internal web interface that's used for me to log in and make configuration changes, for users to see their data, manage their profile, and for deans and department heads and that sort of thing to run reports. Then that data feeds an externally facing web directory. It's all running on a SQL Server reporting database, and there's an XML-based API that you can pull data from or push data to. And there's also, it runs with SSRS, which allows you to create kind of customized reports. So being SQL Server, it connects to, you can connect with Visual Studio or R. I'll get into a use case here. So there's a lot of data that does not come in with the feeds. For example, appointments, degrees, photos, languages spoken. And some of this data does exist, and some of it is more or less structured. But that's one example of data that you can bring into the system. Sometimes we'll get calls for custom jobs, like a faculty member will say, hey, I ran this science fair. I have this list of faculty who served as judges. Can you add a record to their profile reflecting that work? Or we did a job where we ran through several years' worth of playbills from our theater department and added some of the crew to the system based on what they did with each of those performances. Or I worked with our research data management librarian who had harvested a whole bunch of metadata about data sets from DataSite, which does not feed to the system automatically. And so we push that information into faculty profiles. And then we had a big case where our School of Business had their own system, and so we migrated all of that data over wholesale. You know, when it comes to some of this data, like I said, it's more or less structured. A lot of the work is in pulling it together and cleaning it, like faculty appointments are abbreviated. So, let me pass through this. So we did a survey and we did a bunch of work to collect that information, clean it up, and then we could push it into the system. But it does take some measure of work and updating, like when faculty are promoted or when departments change or merge. This is all work that, you know, we have to do and we have to stay on top of. But what I'm kind of suggesting is this is exactly the kind of detail-oriented metadata work that we specialize in. And it's really, I actually love it. It's really interesting and fun to do this kind of thing. Another example is we harvested a whole bunch of Scopus and ORCID IDs. So as I mentioned, we have a DSpace repository, so this system connects to that, and it both harvests data from the repository into the system. So for example, we archive our faculty extension, faculty fact sheets. So all of that data is harvested and pushed into the system. It also, faculty can deposit their work into the repository. And out of all of the years of work that I did doing open access advocacy, and that was a trickle compared to how much exponentially this increased faculty use of the repository. It's been really dramatic. So wrapping up here, there's a really good report by OCLC Research called Social Interoperability and Research Support. And this posits universities as complex adaptive systems that, you know, we're all used to that term silo. So a lot of this work, just like with ScholComm, research data management and that sort of thing, requires working across these silos. So challenges, these systems can be expensive, and of course the open source ones require dedicated time. Adoption requires engagement at multiple levels, so you really have to have a lot of people on board. There has been some skepticism and resistance, not as much as I really expected, and a lot of it is understandable with, this is going to take up more time, datafication, surveillance. But the benefits, it does give us a measure of influence and allows us to advance specific concerns. And that says 20 seconds. All right, okay. So there's a lot of direct library use cases. I'll just leave you with this last quote. Libraries may be better prepared to serve as the focal points of these efforts than any other units on campus. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our last talk of this block, as we close so many things. We have our last remote presenter of the day, Melanie Walsh and Matt Miller on Book Reconciler, an open source tool for metadata enrichment and work level clustering. So we'll bring the Zoom up again, and fingers crossed. As we wait for our presenter.
Hi.
We can hear you. So
Okay, great.
you got 15 minutes. Head up.
Okay, amazing. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you all in person and have a Philly cheesesteak, but I'm excited to share this work with you nonetheless. So I'm Melanie Walsh, and I'm a professor in the Information School at the University of Washington, and I'm going to be presenting on behalf of my collaborators, Matt Miller, who's at the Library of Congress, and Dan Sinekin, who's at Emory University. And I really just want to emphasize that Matt Miller has been the lead developer on this tool and this project, so I just want to give him his full kudos and credit. So we have developed a tool that can help people take minimal metadata about books. For example, just the title and author of a book, like The Book of Salt by Monique Trong, and they can enrich that information with ISBNs for the book, or subject headings, or even the VOF information for the VOF identifier for that author. And then additionally, the tool can also help cluster manifestations of the same work. So before I talk more about the tool, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the motivation for creating this tool in the first place. So I'm the co-editor of the Post45 Data Collective, where we peer review and publish literary and cultural data sets from 1945 to the present. We've been around for about 5 years now, so we're now at this exciting point where we have a lot of different data sets that we host on our site. So for example, we've got data about books that have won major prizes, and books that have appeared on bestseller lists, and books that have been cited by scholars. And so this is becoming a really valuable resource, but we've also run into various problems and pain points. So for example, going back to the Book of Salt, we now have lots of different information from different sources about the Book of Salt from different data sets, but we're having problems standardizing information across the way that authors are represented or book titles are represented. And I think it's worth noting that a lot of these data sets are manually curated by scholars or contributors, but sometimes they're also scraped from various sources. So there's a lot of different inconsistencies that can be introduced. On top of that, if we think about trying to connect this data with external sources, such as the publicly available checkout data from the Seattle Public Library, which is a very, very fascinating resource that I've been working with in the last several years. We might encounter even more inconsistencies. So for example, in the SPL checkout data, work titles and authors are also represented super differently depending on the edition or format of the book, as well as the checkout system that was being used, whether it was digital or physical. So for us at the Post45 Data Collective, we were really invested in trying to make our bibliographic data more interoperable, more useful. We wanted to introduce more authority control and allow people to enrich their data. And maybe most importantly, we were specifically invested in a tool that could help people do this without requiring a ton of technical expertise. So we started work on this project with Matt Miller several years ago with an internal grant from Emory. And one of the really interesting things that we found was that, some of these problems were sort of boutique and specific to the Post45 Data Collective, or maybe specific to the workflows of humanities researchers who were not as familiar with bibliographic standards or systems, and that's definitely part of the problem. But we were also discovering that these are pain points in a lot of bibliographic systems more broadly, especially when it comes to representing books at the level of the work, when we're talking about like the work in the Ferber sense. And humanities researchers like me, for example, are often most interested in books at the level of the work. Like I was talking about, we want to be pairing information from all these different places. And the way that works are technically implemented across bibliographic systems often varies. And so that makes it challenging to coordinate and connect all of this information. So we realized this is a problem that we could be addressing that was maybe more useful even for the broader field. So in the initial work that we were doing, we created some Python notebooks that were helping people connect their book data and reconcile it and cluster it. But we decided to move to making the tool even more accessible. So we decided to build this tool on top of the incredible software application OpenRefine, which helps people work with messy data and data of various kinds, and is a widely used tool by metadata specialists and digital humanities scholars, et cetera. And one of the really cool things about OpenRefine is it has a way of connecting to different reconciliation services. So we could design a reconciliation service that could plug right into OpenRefine, which made it really attractive. So with our tool, currently it's available as a one-click install app. And once you download the app, you can open it and it's going to launch a little local server. And so then you use that local server and you plug it into OpenRefine. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. But we also had to make decisions about which bibliographic systems to connect this tool to. And we wanted to give users a range of options. So currently it connects to the Library of Congress, WorldCat, Open Library, Wikidata, VOF, HathiTrust, and Google Books. And we have a paper that we published a couple of months ago about this tool where we talk about some evaluation that we did on different services. For example, we found that Google Books often had the best coverage in different areas that we were looking at. So if you're interested in how these systems compare, I would encourage you to go check out that paper. It's also available on our GitHub page. But we are connecting to most of these services through an API, with one exception. The HathiTrust Digital Library does not have an API in this format. And so actually what our tool does is grab the most recent data dump and create it as a SQLite database that you can use to reconcile books against the HathiTrust Digital Library information. And we think that is kind of a potentially exciting path forward going beyond and outside of just API usage. So with the tool, in terms of using it, basically what a user might do is open up a spreadsheet of information with book data, and then click on the column that they want to reconcile, like the title of the book, and then they're going to plug in that local server, enabling the user to connect to the book reconciler tool. And then the user would select which bibliographic system they want to reconcile against. And then they can also pass in other information that might help create a good match. So for example, if there's author information, if there's publication information, a variety of additional properties that can be passed. And then the service is going to run and try to reconcile and then return a variety of matches. We've got a certain threshold set, but you can also manually hover over each match and see visually if it lines up. And then you can also click on the cluster and go and investigate and click on the link for each manifestation that has been determined to be a match. And so this connects with this other piece of the tool, which is this clustering of related manifestations, which you can see here. This is Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse reconciling against Google Books, and a bunch of different manifestations that have been matched as belonging to the same work. So the way that we're doing this clustering is we're using a pretty basic text similarity metric, and we're also using any internal information from that bibliographic system related to manifestations and works. And so then what the user can do is go through and manually select or deselect whether particular manifestations should belong to that work or not. And so this gives human oversight to our tool, but also gives some creativity and subjectivity in terms of determining what might count for a work depending on the user's goals. There's also some global level configuration settings. So you could say, for example, I only want English translations, or I only want this or that. And then once all of that is done, a user can then enrich the information with additional properties like subject headings or ISBNs or page counts, descriptions, book cover information, depending on the bibliographic service, because not all of them offer the same properties. So in our work, we found it's usually most useful to try to reconcile against multiple of them if you're looking for like really rich information about a certain collection of books. On top of that, there are various other settings that a user can change in this basic configuration interface that appears with the book reconciler tool. And I'm not going to go into all of that in great detail at this point. But if you're interested in checking out the tool and reading through the documentation, watching a demo tutorial, you can find it on our GitHub page, which is available via this QR code and this link. And so a couple other quick things I would say are that we kind of just launched this tool a couple of months ago, so we're really eager for people to try it and use it. And maybe most importantly, we'd be super excited if people want to contribute in terms of like contributing code or building on top of this tool, or even contributing ideas. We received funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities for this tool, but then our grant was canceled like many others last spring. So we weren't fully able to implement everything that we wanted to, and we're going to try to maintain this tool as best we can into the future. But one of the best ways of doing that is really incorporating and building out a community. And maybe even beyond that, we're kind of hoping that this tool can serve as sort of a provocation or conversation starter for these kind of work level bibliographic issues, especially across different systems. So thank you so much for your time, and I'd love to talk more in any capacity.
All right. Thank you, Melanie. And that is the last talk before our break. We will let people get up and move around and do what you need to. But one other thing we have sort of pre-ish break is book giveaways. This year we happen to have the generous contribution of the University of Minnesota Press and their digital open source publications Manifold. It's used by institutions such as City University of New York, California Digital Library, and Affordable Learning Georgia to do everything from publishing open access textbooks that replace commercial options to publishing medical textbooks with animated resources. Manifold is the friendly, scalable, sustainable way to add the web to your publishing workflow. So we've got 6 books to give away and this fun little spinner thingy. So we're going to run this and names come up. If you need to step out, you can still get the book. Chris, would you like to raise your hand? Is the one. So Chris in the back is the one who will handle giving the books to you. So see Chris if your name gets called. All right, and our first one is Julia Corus. All right. And number 2 is Mike Williams. Number 3 is Bart Mullins. Feel free to harass me if I screw up your name later. All right, we're halfway through. Number 4. Cypress Payne. All right, 2 more to go. We have Brandon Dudley. And our final book winner is Jim Kemmerer. All right, so that now lets you guys go take a break. If you're up next is lightning talks. If you're doing a lightning talk and need slides or anything and haven't loaded them up here, now is the time to do that. Be back by 3 o'clock to hear all of the fun lightning talks we have. All right, folks, if you want to be here for the lightning talks, we ask that you come take your seats. Anyone who has signed up for lightning talks, just feel free to line up on either side of the stage, and we'll have you come up as time allows. Let's see, everybody hopefully has loaded stuff on the computer. Otherwise, feel free to talk extemporaneously. We'll mention this again at the end, but just a quick shout out. If you haven't signed up for a newcomer dinner and you're here, sign up for newcomer dinner. It's a good time to get to know people. And if you're on the live stream and you're local, feel free to come join the newcomer dinner. We won't exclude folks who are in walking and driving distance. Now, for lightning talks, we have 10 of them, and we'll get started with Steve Mayer for the first talk. All right. You got 5 minutes. How do I get to the browser window and slide deck? How did you load it?
Actually, I think it's, can you go, I think it's this.
All right, 5 minutes.
Hello. Hi, my name is Steve Meyer. I work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Libraries. Hi, my name is Steve Meyer, and I work for the University of Wisconsin-Madison Libraries. So this is a question for everybody. Does anybody want to get together and talk about vectors and matrices? So not the metaphorical kind, like cybersecurity attack vectors. I mean the real mathematical objects, arrays of numbers in one or more dimensions, and the creative ways that we might use them to model our bibliographic description. So here's an example, a big table of numbers. In this particular example, the rows represent subject heading terms from MARC records, and the columns correspond to how often those subject terms occur in various call number ranges. That is, the rows are basic frequency distributions. And so we can use relatively simple math equations from linear algebra to compare these vectors, these frequency distributions. The output can then be used in a clustering algorithm so that we can group related subject terms. Here's an experimental user interface to do just that. What I'm attempting to do here is place topical terms into a topical space where that space is represented by the call number classification system. The presumed theory underpinning this experiment is that related terms will co-occur with each other in various groups of call number classifications. Now, obviously, when I plot over 2,000 subject terms in a small window, it will initially look like a mess. However, this interface allows you to zoom into various sections like you would with an online map. So here we see one such zoom level, and a decent cluster of terms that look like they come from the field of psychology and related disciplines. And so some of the early results of this experiment are promising. It is very much an early stage experiment, and there are a lot of clusters that are not useful though. And in some cases, we end up with a straight up spurious correlation machine, because who knew that award-winning Romanian pop-up books were key to crime prevention? But with the joking aside, this is an algorithm that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about X. But importantly, this is an algorithm that's an attempt to apply machine learning, computational techniques with bibliographic description. In this way, in a world of LLMs and neural networks with tens of billions of parameters, this is tiny data and computationally inexpensive. The user interface runs with a simple Solr instance. I'm not even yet using Solr's vector functionality, just caching arrays of strings as JSON arrays for each subject term. And this is a Rails app, so when a subject term is loaded, Ruby is fetching a few thousand subject terms and incurring the cost of parsing those JSON strings before loading them into vectors, and then doing about 5,000 calculations. Now, I mention this because I was surprised to find that the web app is even as performant as it is for such a rudimentary and non-optimized implementation. And so to this end, I want to draw your attention to a talk by Benjamin Lee at CNI back in December, which is online. And he sort of asked libraries to think about minimal computing, defined as no longer thinking about AI just to address questions of scale or to use the fanciest thing, but asking what are the minimal computing resources necessary to advance our goals at an institution. And so I would like to stave off using things like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, for as long as possible, and instead maybe do a little math4lib or something. And we know our data really well, so we might be able to model it and make small models and do stuff that's very efficient. So again, if anyone wants to talk about vectors and matrices, please get in touch with me. My co-conspirator on this project is Becky Standard at the Gender and Women's Studies Librarian's Office at UW-Madison also. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And now Justin Ur.
Test, test.
Oh, it does. It does, but you need to point right.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Uhr. I'm with the Brown University Library, and I'm here to give some sort of tips and tricks and lessons learned when building LLM or any kind of AI-powered applications. Now, this is not, I'm not trying to push anybody into, cramming AI into anything and everything, but I'm sure if we haven't already, a lot of us in this room will find ourselves in the position of somebody coming to us and say, is there a way that we could use AI to do X? And if you find yourself in that position and you start saying, well, maybe let's see, hopefully this can help you, get the best result possible. And this is the 5-minute version. Obviously, I'm going to leave out a lot. Feel free to find me somewhere and ask me about any of this that you're interested in. The first thing, it's easy to get started. So what do I mean by that? You don't have to build a whole application to answer some basic questions about proof of concept. Just go to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever chatbot you already use, paste in a document, paste in some text, formulate some prompt that's roughly along the lines of what you're thinking, and if you get something that seems reasonable, there you go, that's the proof of concept. And in 20 or 30 minutes of back and forth, you can learn a lot about the challenges that might come along down the road, okay? What is, your level of responsibility can vary depending on implementation. What do I mean by that? I mean that your institution could train a model from scratch, host it on your servers, develop a complicated web application with logins and databases and whatnot. But you don't have to do that. The most recent project that I worked on, we made a standalone application. It's hosted on GitHub. The user downloads it. When they open it up, they put in their Anthropic API key, and then they go to town. And Brown is not really doing anything beyond keeping the GitHub page alive. We don't have any sort of ongoing maintenance debt or anything like that. Capabilities will change. This is true of all technology, but with AI especially. Will the thing that you make now be obsolete in 6 months? Yeah. Oh, don't worry about it. Try to build in some flexibility so that it can adapt over time, but don't let that hang you up too much because otherwise you just won't ever build anything. These last two are important. develop a metric to test to as early as possible. I talked about how easy it is to get started and just kind of like putting some stuff in the chat. Try as early as you can to move off of that model and have an actual number that you can use, because otherwise you're in this situation where you have a configuration, you test it, and you're like, oh, that seems pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good. Let's try this other model or this other prompt or this other set of examples or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's also pretty good, not perfect, right? That's not that helpful. So as much as you can, and it really depends on the project, how easy this is or hard this is, but try to come up with like a number where, you know, going from this model to this model took us from 62% to 85%, great. And going along with that, try to be organized, and ideally even try to like automate things and make things a pipeline as much as possible, so that you're not sort of like, well, I tried some stuff and it seemed pretty good, and then like we had a number, we had a metric, I got 95%. Well, how did you get 95%? I don't remember. I don't remember what prompt I used or what model I used or what the configurations were. So at a minimum, whenever you do these tests, you're keeping track of all the parameters that went in. But even better if you can set things up in an automated way so that trying a new thing is as simple as, you know, hitting go, and then you've already got your 100 test documents in one spot there, never changing, and you've got your model that you can specify and your prompts that you can specify, and you can just try a thing and then get a number, and then try another thing and get a number, and try another thing and get a number. So you can explore the space, because the number of different models and prompts and settings that you can potentially change, there's like an infinite number of combinations. By being systematic about it, then when somebody asks you why are you using, you know, a temperature setting of 0.3, you can say, well, we tried 0.2 and 0.4 and 0.5, and 0.3 gave us the best results, instead of, well, that's just like what we started with, and we never really got around to trying anything else because it would have been too much work. Right? Again, this is a super abbreviated version. I'd love to talk more about this with anybody who's interested, so find me wherever, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. Next up is Eric Morgan.
How do you make this go up? Not that short. Hi. Can I get to load something, huh? Okay. Where's my browser? Where's the bus?
Oh, is it browser?
Make a new file. No, browser. Every time you do a computer demonstration, something goes wrong. Oh, it's Windows. This is the log part. Go. Go. There. Oh, that's not going to work. That's fine. I'm not going to worry about it.
5 minutes.
Hi. My name's Eric. I'm enjoying building a library. I have recently archived and curated about 700,000 open access journal articles. And what's fun about this process is that I've used OAI to make it happen. And this is a randomly selected title because I don't know how to use the Windows machine. But basically what it tells you is how many things were published in a particular year by this particular title. So in 2016, there were a certain number, and then by 2004, there was a different number. All very well and good and fine. And you can use this to say yourself, is this open access journal sustainable? Is it a once and done thing or not? Now I've collected all the titles, all the articles from this particular title, and I've made MARC records of every single one of these things. So I have about 700,000 MARC records. Then for fun, I poured all these, this is, currently my library has these items in it. So there's only 600 items for one particular thing, but there's like 350,000 things from the Hadi Trust, and there's however many thousand things from DOAJ that I've harvested. And now, later on, I'm going to add my 750,000 things to my collection. And so in my little Koha catalog, which costs me $25 a month to run, I'll have a public library of about, I don't know, 1.2 million items or something like that. Now, what's fun is that you can search it. Yay! So, for example, I'm going to search for I'll get there. You still have to use it. I will. So it'll probably search for justice. And it found 4,039 of them. Well, that's a lot. But I can do the facet thing, and I can make it smaller. So now I should end up with about 2,000 articles that have something to do with justice. And I previously cataloged them all, and they all have subject headings ish-esque. And I'm going to narrow my list down to 500 items. And now that's cool is that, you know, when you do that relevancy ranking stuff, the difference between the most relevant one and the next most relevant one is so small. Those articles have so much more in common than they have differences. So the first 12 articles in your cool Web of Science search is kind of like, you need a lot. Well, I got a lot. After I authenticate, because it's improper to do anonymous computing for people, after I authenticate, it will read those, how many articles were there? 500? And it will copy them to my remote server, and it will make a data set that's usable for computation. The idea being that you need more than just these 5 articles at the top of a Web of Science search. And I'm having a lot of fun building a digital library of my own design, and it doesn't require very much stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. And now Kate Dybel is up for the next talk.
I'll use this one so I don't have to try to be on tippy toes or anything. So I'm talking about ADA Archives and Ally. And I know a lot of people have already talked about AI, and I don't want to call out anyone here. This is something that has been kind of stewing with me for months now. And so just to go into this is, you know, the ADA Title II goes live for many public entities, including many libraries, on April 24th. So I hope you're ready. And you might have noticed that, like, I had the reputation of being an accessibility witch, which, given all that, I just haven't spoken much about it. So you might be wondering why. So a lot of it is due to burnout. Some previous jobs really hit me hard. Also, I was running an iOS migration from Voyager to Folio. That took a lot of work. Also, everything else going on in the world. Yeah, you all know what that is. And really also, PCOM's not a public entity. But given the timing of the EAD revision, the large quantity of archival materials from Mediate, and the current AI bubble, that never started. Oh, that's great. I need to share some thoughts on, and advocate a little. So is it okay to use AI for accessibility remediation of archives? Yes, given the time frames and the scope of work. I'm going to say that. But do you need to do human verification for that? That's trickier to answer. Yeah. So accessibility was never about legal obligations or meeting some target WCAG conformance level. It's about humans. That's basically what it is, about making sure that we are not making things more difficult for people who want to learn. And with that, I'm going to borrow something from the fact that I've been working at a medical college for almost 4 years now. Let's try to do no harm. Or another way of putting it, let's minimize the damage. So what do I mean by harm? So there are a couple things. One, we know that only 30 to 40% of WCAG criteria are truly automatable for testing. Everything else requires a lot of human performance. And with that, I'm going to question the quality of the AI training data, given things like the WebAIM 1 million web page report that basically found that all of them have significant accessibility errors. I question the training. And accuracy rates do not necessarily reflect the impact. As I've mentioned before, if a science textbook OCR'd correctly, like 97%, but that 3% were all the technical terms, that would be a horrible book to learn from. And then there are nuances out there, such as, a standalone image in an archive, an image description is okay for alt text, but an image in like a newspaper, you need to consider the context as well as just describing the image. So how do you minimize damage? One, be open and transparent. Label things in your interface as remediated by AI. Just accept that. You're going to be keeping track of that anyhow, or you should be. So make it visible to your patrons. Two, plan for future remediation. One, the standards and the legal responsibilities change. And also, aren't those AI models supposed to get better? But really also establish a remediation on demand service, because you're probably going to need to do that to optimize for a particular disabled patron's needs. I can tell you I had to do that a lot at Syracuse. And access needs may be very specialized, particularly if you're working with archival materials, because we know people who dive into archives for research, they're looking at interesting things that are not just the most typical. So just remember, legal obligations and time crunches do allow you to necessarily take the shortcuts of AI, but it is not necessarily providing quality products. So please just consider, be open, and do all that. So there, I will not stew anymore over all this. And you'll hear me in about 40 minutes, I think.
Thank you, Kate. Next up, we have Jeremy Nelson.
This will be easier. Hello, my name is Jeremy Nelson. I'm a software developer at Stanford University Libraries, and this past year in 2025, I was tech lead on a project called Blue Core. Blue Core is a collaborative effort by a number of different institutions, including Stanford University, Cornell University, University of Pennsylvania, UC Davis, and the Library of Congress on creating a shared BibFrame environment. And part of what we're doing this past year was developing a prototype, so I thought I would go and sort of introduce you to some of the things that we've been doing in the prototype. So I will bring this up real quick. So this is our development website. We have a number of different services. We have the Sinopia Link Data Editor. We have the Marva Link Data Editor. We also have what we call a graph toolbox that sort of is just a hodgepodge of some related functionality that didn't really fit into Sinopia or Marva. And all these different services, these linked data services, are all connected to a back-end data store, which we developed on Postgres. We're using Keycloak as a central sort of authentication and authorization service. And we also have a running instance of Apache Airflow to manage some of the batch workflows that we have in terms of Sinopia. So I will just kind of show you a couple of these. So I will log into Sinopia real quick. So you can see I'm signing into Keycloak. And then I'm in Sinopia, and I can run queries. And if you're not familiar with Sinopia, it came out of well, didn't like that. It came out of a linked data for data production series of grants. We also have Marva. And let me go back to that. So Marva is the Library of Congress's linked data editor. And again, what we're trying to do with Blue Core is provide sort of a central API that allows different linked data editors to talk and use the same data store. We also have implemented a couple of different integrations with particularly Folio and Alma. So the different institutions that are part of this initial pilot, two of us, or three of us, I guess, are on Folio. The other two are Alma. And so we are trying to, again, provide this sort of centralized store of linked data and addressing some of the, I guess, pain points that people have been promising about linked data for a while. So this allows users, hopefully catalogers, to not duplicate their efforts. Any of the participating catalogers and any of the institutions all edit the same BibFrame works and instances, and then they can export to their various ILSs or library system platforms their instances, and it also really allows this idea that we don't need to anymore duplicate bibliographic data, that we can take advantage of the core properties of linked data and sort of push us forward on how do we sort of share the workload and provide some of these central services. If you're interested, this next year we're in the MVP phase of this project, where we're going to expand and we're going to try to include the entire id.loc.gov as sort of our base data set. We'll be looking at other institutions who may be interested in partnering with us. And then finally, if you haven't, I'm giving a workshop on Thursday on how you actually can develop with the Blue Core software stack. It's all open source. You can actually run it in Docker Compose. And I hope that if you have any questions, please let me know, or through Slack, or my email is jpnelson@stanford.edu. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. All right, we'll go slightly out of order. Next up, we have Will Martin.
No slides. Hello. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today, with no slides, about some of the issues that I've seen in administering EasyProxy over the years in my capacity as the head of systems at the Chester Fritz Library at the University of North Dakota. And I'm going to share two things. One of them happened last week, and the other one happened about a decade ago. Last week, we had a problem with the Foundation directory online. People started reporting that when they tried to access it from off campus, they were getting a different error message depending on which browser they were using. Chrome and its variants would say, error, empty response, whereas Firefox would say, secure connection failed. We looked into it and tried updating the stanza, tweaking some things, and eventually determined that there was nothing wrong with the stanza. The logs for the EasyProxy server indicated that we were getting 906 errors on all of the traffic that was affected. 906, if you haven't come across it before, means empty response. We were not getting any data back from the vendors, and this was weird. So we did something that we almost never do. We filed a ticket with OCLC. As a self-hosted institution, this is something that we very rarely have had to do over the years, and they poked at it and said, that's weird. So I filed a ticket with our network folk because it looked to me like there was something upstream that was eating the data that we were supposed to be getting back. And sure enough, they came back and said, hey, we upgraded our Palo Alto firewall on Tuesday. That's weird. So they took a look, and sure enough, there was an error in the code for the Palo Alto firewall, which was causing it to reject packets with a packet size of 1,500 bytes, which is the standard for Ethernet, under certain circumstances that only applied to certain packets going through EasyProxy for the Foundation Directory Online, ProQuest eBook Central, the McGraw-Hill Access Physiotherapy, and assorted other titles from them. It took days to narrow down, but we finally got it. And the solution was to drop the maximum transmission unit from 1,500 to 1,300, and then they have filed a ticket upstream to see if they can get that code fixed so they can go back to 1,500, which is the standard for Ethernet. The other instance happened about a decade ago. We had a professor who was a specialist in languages from Afghanistan, who was over in Afghanistan assisting the United States military with the ongoing occupation that was happening at the time. And he was trying to access our resources, and it didn't work consistently. We had to spend weeks doing back and forth. It was very slow because he was on the opposite side of the planet. We'd send a response, wait for 12 hours and get a response back, and then he responded. These 12-hour time delays made everything slower. It turned out what happened was he was issued a cell phone that had a modem built into it, and he was using that as his internet connection. But he wasn't happy with how fast it was. So he went out and privately got a satellite internet connection, and he used that for a while. But he wasn't happy with how fast it was. And so, and I'm still not entirely certain how he managed to do this, he contrived to split his traffic between the satellite connection and the cell phone connection. This triggered a security precaution in EasyProxy, saying that you cannot have an IP address in more than one country at a time, but it would only do it when the satellite that was receiving his transmission was not over Afghanistan. Amazingly, they did not teach me how to calculate the orbital period of a satellite in library school. The solution in the end was to find out the complete IP ranges of his two ISPs and map them all to an imaginary country in the configuration of EasyProxy so that he would be in one country all of the time. And that's what I have for you today.
Thank you, Will. All right. Now, Jonathan Rockheim.
So I guess I'll use this one so I can be at the computer, right? Oh, sorry. I just need to bring up my thing. What? Is this not right? Well, oh, you have to swap that. That worked. Oh. It's not already set up to do that? I don't know how to do that. Nobody told me to use the PC. I would use it if you told me to. You know, there's a lot of talking going on. I can't touch it. I can't catch it all. You want to switch back to PC? I'm not trying to cause problems. I didn't mean. I'm sorry. I thought they were both available. I thought somebody said there's a Mac and a PC. You can use either one. But I imagined that. It's a lot of rules to keep track of here. Okay. So I need a browser. I love this rubber keyboard. That was spelled wrong. Sorry for the delay. Well, this doesn't seem to have internet. I did nothing. Oh, there we go. You touched the thing again, and it did it. Okay. My name is Jonathan Rockhind. Can I see the? I can sort of see the thing. Please start it. My name is Jonathan Rockhind. I work at the Science History Institute. So we have a collection, among other things. Thank you. We have a collection, among other things, of. I'm Jonathan Rockhind. I work at the Science History Institute, and we have a collection, among other things, of about 800 oral histories with scientists that have been done over the past 30 years. So I wanted to do a little project to see, can we use LLM technology to provide a way to investigate, research, find things in. I'd never used this before. I wasn't sure what it would do. Let's find out. And my first version looked like this, and I was very proud of it. It is really cool. It's like a narrative answer. I knew, okay, every claim has to be cited, and I was very proud. You can hover over the citations and get a quote that backs up whatever the LLM is saying. Very good. It was very good. When we showed it to stakeholders, not good enough. So we decided, basically based on what the tool was good at and what our values were as an organization and as professionals, what we wanted to do, we became clear after seeing what it could do, this tool is for finding passages of interest in the oral histories. And we want to move to a more list-based format that gives you sort of the passages of interest. And even though the previous one, I'd had it cite everything, it still need more minimization of any kind of interpretation. We don't want the LLM interpreting. We want it saying what is in the oral history. So that involved giving it, oh, it's very hard to see the clock from here. You have to like lean way over or be way taller than me, and I'm pretty tall. So that involved giving instructions like you are not giving answers about the world. You are only giving answers about what people in the oral history said. And it involved turning the temperature to 0, meaning no creativity, very dry. And the present tool can't do an answer about the whole collection. It can't do an aggregation or synthesis over the whole collection. So we wanted it to be much more clear in its answers about the limitations of its scope, about what it could give you an answer on. And that all involved changing the system prompt to tell it to do those things. So this is the current version, which is very nice. So it starts with it starts with sort of a summary of what it found, but then it has specific findings, it has summaries, specific things it found, and it has both of them had a link to the transcript. You can go to the transcript. For some of our transcripts that have been coded this way, you can go right to the paragraph in the transcript where this quote is from. And you can see the disclaiming framing. It starts by saying, in this case, based on passages from 12 oral histories chosen as useful to this topic, several scientists and their families emigrated, and it ends by saying, this may not represent a complete list of emigrants discussed across the full collection, and additional relevant information may exist in other passages not examined here. Because of the way the tool works, it's only looking at, in this case, 12 passages. This is working really well. It is a work in progress. It's not available to the public yet. For those who know, this is a very naive RAG approach, meaning it's using it's a very naive RAG approach. It's using embedding technology to find the top 12 semantically aboutness similar things using OpenAI text embedding 3 large embeddings. Then it gives it to the LLM. Claude Sonnet, we just upgraded to the recently released 4.6. So the technology is kind of straightforward, what they call RAG. We learned, yeah, get the stakeholders involved soon, because we showed that, I think when we showed them that first version, and people said, this isn't good enough. And they were very, people remain very skeptical of AI and very worried about it. But we were able to say, okay, find examples that don't do that are unacceptable, and then we were able to tune it and take their feedback, said they wanted more list-like format, and that built a lot of trust. They said, oh, this new version is a lot better. We can't find any more examples that are unacceptable, or very few of them. And that led to the current version of the tool seems useful enough that even people that were very skeptical were like, yeah, this is going to let us and our users find stuff they couldn't have found before. So we probably have to keep investigating it. Like, it doesn't make sense to keep this from people because it's useful enough. So yeah, that's it. Great, 26 seconds to say, let's talk more about this. Let's do a breakout maybe. I'm very curious if anybody else is experimenting with tools like this. This is looking very good, and it's not available to the public yet. You can't see it yet unless you come and look at it on my computer when I'm logged in. But it's going to first be released just internally to our staff, and then we'll get a lot more feedback. Tell us the things that didn't work, tell us the things that did work, and we hope eventually it may be public. But we're going very slowly and deliberately to be careful with it and have something that's actually useful, not just to do AI for the heck of it.
Thank you, Jonathan. And now we have Daniel Sanford.
All right, well, I'm going to make this easy. My name is Daniel Sanford. I'm with Hosting Solutions and Library Consulting, and I have no slides, no computer touches, anything else. So fingers crossed, as long as the microphone doesn't break, I should be all right. Yeah, I did just jinx it. That was my bad. I do apologize. So I'm going to start off just by briefly opening up with a comment that this is going to be discussing a broad problem that involves everyone's favorite topic, bots, which shout out to the bots channel on Code4Lib. It is a very useful place to get a lot of information. And shout out to the many, many various tools that members of the Code4Lib community have invented for things like this. But I want to talk about a slightly different problem in that with all this existing, we can do a lot of stuff to slow down bots, limit them, and that's great. But there are sometimes consequences of some of these tools. So I'm going to start off with our fact that we run a number of services for the state of Pennsylvania. Open listservs, other tools for librarians to hop on and say things. So people can hop on, they can sign up for things, they can comment, they can post. And this is all wonderful. It's great when the community comes up and talks to you. Unless that community is bots who are primarily trying to sell you pharmaceutical products. Those are not welcome members of the library community or just generally the community. One of the tools we had was Google's reCAPTCHA service, which is very good at noticing things that look like bots. It comes with a couple negative consequences. One is, I don't know if anyone's used this before, it is entirely obtuse as to what they use to bill you. What is a reCAPTCHA assessment? How often are they calculated? That's a mystery. They don't tell you. You can ask them, they still don't tell you. And that's not great, but life goes on. And we're sitting here, we're running our lovely service, and we've got some stuff up to kind of limit the amount of activity on our websites to keep bots away, but everything is limited. And then we look over and I'm like, why is our reCAPTCHA bill $200 now? Overnight. So we have an automated billing system which alerts you the day after. So that all happened very quickly, and they just kept hammering us. Our somewhat naive solution was to just say, well, let's look and block large swaths of the world. I am very sorry if you are from Vietnam. I am very sorry if you are from China. I'm very sorry if you're from Singapore. I'm very sorry if you're from the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, any country that has data centers. I'm very sorry if you're from Virginia. We do, in fact, have to allow some people from Virginia to come in. It's a little hard to actually lock that out. But unfortunately, by blocking large swaths of ASNs and just geo-blocking these things, we end up cutting a lot of people off, and which is not something we want to do as librarians. I'd like to make the resources broadly available. I'd like to make sure that they are widely open. But at this point, it's just, even if we have systems that do work, sometimes the cost or computational complexity to keep them running just makes it unfeasible versus simpler blocks. Another related one I'm just going to throw out with this is we run mailing lists. And that's great. Again, we can very easily catch and block a lot of bots. But every time they do that, they just keep filling up the in-process users that are not fully set up. So we go from having a reasonable mailing list of, say, 4,000 people to saying our mailing list has 400,000 people. And it's now a little less who can't do anything. We have successfully blocked and categorized them, but it just fills up, and now they have to be slothed off again, hidden out, and we have to go back to hiding the access to the sign-on or blocking off because we just cannot leave it open without getting hammered by something. I throw all this out not just to complain, but to say that if anyone has more tools or more interesting ideas that let us have a little flexibility, there are things like Anubis, there are things like Turnstile, which are very good at limiting some of that rate, which is great if you're being hammered from as a DDoS perspective, but when they're just literally generating some level of unpleasant activity, even if you've cut them back, it's still costing you money or time or work to process them. And I'd like not to have to block every country that has a large and thriving data center industry in their economy. So thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Next up is Emily Linema?
Okay, like a candy bar. I think you can hear me. Hi, I'm Emily Linema. I'm at the University of Michigan Library right now. And I just wanted to do a little talk about research I would like to do as opposed to research I've actually already done because I'm really interested in what people in this community think. So we're like in this age of AI and we talk about ethics a lot and we talk about AI. Almost every time we talk about ethics, every time we talk about AI, we talk about ethics. And one of the things that my organization is interested in doing is establishing guiding principles for ethical adoption of new technologies. And I've looked around a bit in the community and seen some things that other people have done, but one thing I don't see very often are ethical guidelines that address environmental sustainability for AI initiatives. And maybe that's because you just simply can't do that, but that's what I'm trying to figure out. And so environmental sustainability, so things to think about, right? Our power usage, water usage, how to measure like in the moment, how are we using these things, plus how expensive is it to train these things, plus how expensive is it to like just keep it alive? And I don't know, there's probably other stuff too. I haven't thought that hard about it yet. Yeah, here's my cat. Cat's named Lily. It's not very sustainable to let her steal puzzle pieces because then you can't find them and they don't last that long. And so one of my questions is, can we learn to compute environmental impact across our technology footprint more generally and not just for AI initiatives? So we're like starting to think about this for AI, but we maybe don't have a very robust thinking about this generally across all the kinds of computation that we do. And I'm really interested in seeing these things in like a holistic manner. This is my playbook so far, and my slides will be showing up in Slack. There's a green research computing guide that the subject librarian for physics and astronomy and the School for Environment and Sustainability at U of M has put together. And it cites this reference that I linked here, 10 Simple Rules to Make Your Computing More Environmentally Sustainable, published in PLOS, Computational Biology. So this is just as a sample of things that I'm sort of looking at and thinking about. Tools like Code4Lib to calculate carbon footprint for your work, and then include that sort of in your cost-benefit analysis when you're looking at doing computation. Choosing your computation facility intentionally, so like looking at carbon data for Google Cloud regions when you're picking Google Cloud regions for hosted stuff. Choosing your hardware or your LLM intentionally. So there are, I think, some tools that maybe can estimate how much different LLMs cost for different kinds of computations. And then some of the other things he recommends are like increasing efficiency of your code, testing frugally, things like that. And we maybe are starting to think about these things in AI, but maybe have thought about them less in other parts of the computational work that we do. So just to say, like, I'd like to learn more from others, like whether other people think that having a better understanding of the cost of computation across a broader swath of our infrastructure and applications would be valuable as we try to make ethical decisions? And then are there communities of practice within GLAM or somewhere else that are already making these kinds of calculations? And so far, in the like 3/4 of a day I've been here, I've heard that this is happening in digital preservation, which I did not know, but I put a link in here to the NDSA's Levels of Digital Preservation Environmental Sustainability Guide that talks about how expensive is it to take on digital preservation tasks in terms of compute, which I had no idea that this conversation was happening within our community. And then I'm also interested in like tools or articles that people recommend. So it's something I would love to talk about if there are other people that are interested.
All right, thanks, Emily. And our last one for today for lightning talks is Ed Summers. I assume you want this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, my name's Ed Summers. I work at Stanford University. And I'm going to talk really quickly about tracking and evaluating institutional research. So you might be wondering what the heck that is. So this is just a screenshot of a website that is not publicly available. So no URL for it, but it's called this Research Intelligence at Stanford. And so the idea is that and it has this name Rialto, which has RI, I guess that's the research intelligence part. But the basic idea is that, we wanted to build a simple website that provides a view into like what the research output of the university is. Sort of buried in this website that's not yet available is a set of visualizations for example, like publication outputs by different departments, open access, the degree to which departments or researchers publish open access, like ORCID adoption, whether researchers at the university have ORCIDs over time, and basically ways of sort of looking at what research looks like at the university. And this project has had multiple attempts at trying to produce something useful over time. The most recent incarnation of it is to collect data from well-known scholarly publishing platforms like these here, like Web of Science, PubMed, Dimensions, OpenAlex. Altmetric is one that we're thinking about adding but haven't done it yet. And then sort of augmenting an existing profile system that we have at the university that's basically just like a page for researchers at the university. They have their own profile page that lists their publications. So we had this sort of legacy application that we were augmenting with data from these places. This is a dreaded Airflow DAG diagram, which you, I'm sure, cannot read. But basically, it's just a picture of a workflow that we have, which starts with a set of known researchers at the university, goes out to these different platforms, collects the data from their APIs, and then underneath, it's basically just storing the results in a Postgres database. And then, some reports are generated that are basically kind of like tables that we visualize with a system called Tableau, which is a data visualization platform. So the reason why I'm giving this lightning talk is that if you've ever done this kind of work, you'll know that it's like kind of fraught and difficult. These are some of the challenges that we're facing. So the access to who the students and faculty and staff are at the university is sensitive information. It's not very often easy to get a hold of. It's sometimes hard to keep up to date. There are sometimes multiple systems at universities that, for making this data available, and sort of like getting connected to the right people can be challenging. And then, the data can change over time. We have problems of deduplication, so you get the same publication back from different platforms that maybe don't have a DOI, so you don't really know that they're the same thing, so there's challenges around that. And knowing how to query the systems, that can be challenging. We're using ORCID to be very conservative in how we're querying for stuff, but even that has problems. And then there's, we can use the different platforms have different licensing around them that, controls how that data can be reshared, further downstream. And then, there are challenges around the visualizations, communicating information poorly, and not that we're trying to do this, but that's a risk, right? Is that you communicate information poorly and that the impacts of that are significant. But then there are also real opportunities as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, you're doing anything like this at your university, please come find me and maybe we could do a little breakout session. I put cats there. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Ed. All right, so we are now into the last talk block of the day. So we just have another hour-ish for everyone to get through. And no more remote speakers, so what could possibly go wrong with the tech now, right? As I have now cursed the rest of the conference, we have Kate Dybel again with new and old-fangled HTML elements, which is accessible, really. So we just need a sec to get this set up.
Okay, so I'm just going to dive right into this, get into things. So if any of you have ever had any training in ARIA, accessibility rich interactive applications, I believe. If I got that right, please tell me. The first rule of ARIA that you ever hear about is no ARIA is better than bad ARIA. So if anyone ever says, you don't have enough ARIA on your page, they probably are speaking out of their arse. I'm going to apologize. I'm not going to be as clean this one. But there is often also the 0F law of ARIA. Use semantic elements when possible. Avoid rolling your own. So no, use a button. Don't add JavaScript to a div and suddenly make it interactive, but you'll screw up the keyboarding, I guarantee. So if you use if you use semantic element, you're guaranteed accessibility, right? Well, I have some bad news for you. I have to be honest. There is no Easter Bunny. Not real. But there is a Santa Claus. Fear her. I don't know how she did not kill me. So what do we mean by a semantic element being accessible? Well, its purpose and content must be conveyed clearly through multiple modalities. And that means it must populate the browser's accessibility tree, gets reported by assistive technologies, and all of the above is done correctly. But there are nuances to this. So the accessibility of any element depends on what attributes and properties you put on it, any scripts involved, sometimes CSS, but then there's also more fine-tuned things, such as browser support, and assistive, in which you'll be seeing called AT support. So let's get into an example. Opt group. So opt group is that cool little thing that allows you in a select menu to make little divisions. And to make it accessible, it basically, you use it, and then you just have to make sure that it's visually distinct, meets color contrast, and really, assistive technology should announce that it is a group. It's saying that. But what happens? Well, if you're running NVDA on Firefox, it will actually announce itself as it being a group. So in that previous example, it would have said Swedish cars group. And then probably would read Volvo Sob, which, by the way, that's an old example because Sob doesn't exist. VoiceOver on Safari on iOS, but not macOS, will announce its group role. Other browsers and screen reader combinations, to the best of what my sources tell me, I can't test everything based upon my current computer setups, do not report the group role. So is that a problem? Arguably, yes. What about the the href attribute? We all love links. We're libraries. We're all about portals. So how accessible are those links? Well, generally links are pretty good, but there are other protocols such as mail-to, telephone, SMS, FTP. So how accessible are those protocols? Well, mail-to, pretty much all browsers and screen readers will report these as email links, which is good. So you don't get surprised when suddenly you click on a link and you're taken to a new application. FTP and SFTP, also, they get reported by JAWS. NVDA and VoiceOver really don't. And no known screen reader that I'm aware of announces SMS or telephone links. So, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, why are they not supported? Well, the big one is that screen reader development has a ton of priorities and everything. And also, when I've brought it up, there's a lot of developers said, well, maybe it would be too noisy for screen reader users. So we don't want to do that. They have to deal with all this extra information. I don't think that's a good reason, but that's my personal call. But should we still use those protocols? Well, of course. They're very good. They make things connected and work on mobile. And it just makes sure that you include in the visible link text that it's in telephone or SMS. So you're wondering, how do I learn about these? Well, one, you can test for yourself. But not everyone is a screen reader user expert or even, has access to everything. I don't currently have access to JAWS anymore. You can also talk to the larger web accessibility community. And, like the Web Ally Slack, which, my slides are in Zenodo, so you can do this. If you want to join that one, you need an invitation, so reach out to me after the conference. But also, there are some really nice resources out there about assistive technologies and browsers and what do they support. So but I've only been talking about old elements, href and op group. What about some of the newer HTML5 elements? So let's look at dialogue in details. So the dialogue element, you're going to hear good news from me. Creating an accessible modal dialogue on your own takes a lot of effort. There's tons of things you have to control for, and these are only 3 of the high-level things. But there's a lot more. It's hard to do. The development of the dialogue element went through multiple rounds of vetting by accessibility experts. And if you need a modal dialogue, use it. I'm just telling you, use it. Do not use a custom implementation. So those of you who use Bootstrap, their dialogue implementation, it's better than others, but it is still bad in some ways. And really, the MDN dialogue documentation is really awesome. Now let's get into detailed summary. So creating a a disclosure widget with JavaScript and ARIA is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of good explanations on it. And really, the detailed summary element made this even easier. Except there's one interesting situation. Let's say you have a web page with different sections that you want to actually make collapsed. So you want something like this, section H2 and all that. So can you do that with a detailed summary? Maybe put the headings in the summary tag? No. The problem is the summary element acts as a button for the disclosure and thus has a role assigned as a button. Headings have a role of heading. You can't put a heading role inside a button. So therefore, it doesn't work because things have only one role. So what you have to do, this is a case where you would have to roll your own. It would have to be your heading, and then you would put the button inside and pretty much create your own. It's a little more difficult, but not too bad. Oh, and here's another fun one. We often make lists unstyled. We don't put a dot or block or anything in front of it or anything like that. And you're going, okay, cool. Yeah, unfortunately, Apple and decided that with VoiceOver, hey, if a list doesn't have like a bullet point on it, it's not really a list, so we won't announce that it's a list. That means all your navigation menus with unstyled, unordered lists don't get recognized as a list. That's not great. Now, Apple walked this back a little, and they did decide to, allow it in some situation, kind of inconsistently. But you can override this by explicitly adding the list role. I've gotten to the point that anytime I make a list now, I always put role equals list in it. It's just a habit, just to avoid this problem. And let's get into another list, my favorite, description lists. So these have been around since basically 1993. These are great. They're super awesome for listing metadata. But here's the problem. Screen readers do not really describe these at all. They will just combine the definition term and the definition elements as individual items. So say you had 4 terms with 4 definitions. It would be a total of 8 items. Nothing really gets distinguished. And there's something there. And it gets even worse if you have multiple definitions for a single term. It's just not really well respected. And I have a link in something that. So the reason why it's, the accessibility community says don't really use the definition list or description list because, hey, it's just not really that supported by screen readers, and you can just use nested lists or tables. And I go, no, it's actually a valuable semantic element. A lot of times I see in the accessibility community, oh, this is actually really useful. It's useful in writing glossaries and all sorts of things like that. But no, we're supposed to do with a nested list or table. So warning, I'm going to get a little bit salty here. So Fiona is just warning you that I'm going to get a little angry here. I originally said that HTML element accessibility requires gets reported by an assistive technology. Did I talk about assistive technologies, or did I talk about screen reader support? That's the big problem there. Yep. There is already a common misnomer in accessibility that making something accessible is about making sure that screen reader users can use it. Well, that's true. You need something to be accessible, but that's not the only contingency there. We have people who use magnification, sighted people who use keyboard navigation. We want to do cognitive support, all these different things, not just supporting screen readers. But because of this, a lot of conversations about accessibility best practices end up talking about what best supports screen reader users. And this is a problem because, as I said, those are not just the only users going on. And this is something that is really difficult to talk about. This is similar to pretty much like having to at times go into an accessibility, if I went into an accessibility community and talked about this, it'd be similar to me walking into a group of largely white professionals and saying like, hey, you have a racism problem. Because people are going to take it personally and reject it. So why does this occur? I'm going to spitball a few things. One, there are complex tech adoption issues as to why screen readers have become far more standardized than other assistive technology. There is really no consistency among text-to-speech tools. They all implement things in a slightly different way. And I can go into exactly why all this is. I wrote my dissertation basically on why assistive reading technology for people with dyslexia and other reading disabilities is not that good. Yeah, I'm 15 years out on it, but I could talk about it more. But there's also, too, I think that there's a misguided view at times, and I've encountered this before, that screen reader users are listed as the most in need of accessibility support. I'll admit, they do face significant barriers. But the thing is, though, we do not need to be doing Oppression Olympics. This is a problem here. And it's one of those, like, if we want to just prioritize one group, we have to then question, well, if what we're doing for them good for other disability groups. And we can argue at times that that may not be the case. There's a lot of visual affordances that I see a lot of discussions in accessibility specific spaces that say like, oh, you shouldn't do that because you can't, like, it doesn't help a screen reader user. And yeah, again, that's hurting one group to benefit another. And again, disability is a big, complex topic. Resources are limited, so it's tricky. We do not talk about enough who is shaping accessibility policy. The internet shifted from being information sharing to commerce. So a lot of conversations about what makes a website accessible are aimed at marketing websites. It applies to academic websites. I mean, how many of you have been frustrated by talking to your marketing department, those of you who work at academic libraries, where it's like going, no, we're a portal. We're not advertising to come to the university. We're providing a service. Library voices are not heard that much. I feel like I'm a lone person in the wind at times talking in these spaces, and publishing has similar issues. I don't have easy answers to these issues, and at best we do your best given current best practices, but we need to speak up more. And just going to switch gears real quick. Hey, are you enjoying Philadelphia? Come work with me. We're hiring at PCOM, Digital Access Technology Librarian, be working with Interlibrary Loan, our Springshare products, Blackboard, and more. I will not be your boss. We have some applicants already, so go ahead and look in there and ask me all sorts of questions that you can on Slack, because I figure I have like 30 seconds. So there I am. I wasn't as salty as I thought I'd be. It's late in the day. I'm tired. And also, somebody want good British food? I know a good place. Join me for newcomer.
Thank you, Kate. All right, next up we have, if we can ever get back to the window, Linda Bellinger, Beth Ann Ray, and Ruth Kitchen-Tillman on AI moderation, assessing AI-generated alt text for digital collections.
Oh, thank you. You would think that I had talked to Kate earlier, but no, I actually ran out of time. But I hope that we will show that I've been listening to Kate as we talk about AI in moderation. So no. Hero back? Never mind. I know we speak for all of us that none of us expected to be giving a presentation about AI, but over the past couple of years, we realized that even if we weren't really interested in doing an AI project, we did need to solve some problems that look like they might have some kind of AI solution. And this is really at the very beginning of the process, closer to the beginning than I expected to be. So we really hope to start a conversation here and continue it after. So our challenge is to make our digital collection images more accessible. And to do that, we really need to add alt text. And Kate's already mentioned the April deadline. We have 1.6 million images in our digital collections, so we did need to look for ways that could speed things up, but we also wanted to do it on our own terms. So one of the things we wanted to do, like Emily, is mitigate our environmental impact. And we'll be talking more about how we tried to do that. But most of all, we really wanted to prioritize inclusive and respectful metadata in this project because we've worked really hard over the past few years at reparative description. And alt text that fails in this respect isn't something we were willing to accept, no matter how much time we might save. And we knew this experiment would not just be figuring out how to get alt text, but also to figure out when and how to moderate that alt text. So to start us off, Ruth is going to talk about how we set out to do this.
All right. So when Linda approached me about setting up the technology side of the house, she already had an idea about what she wanted to do based on Mastodon posts by our friend John Fink, friend of Code4Lib, but in Canada right now. John had been experimenting with the small vision language models that he could host himself. And from a personal note, this project gave me a chance to fulfill our provost's do something with AI while staying away from the big commercial models as much as possible. So John had introduced me to the Olama tool, which allows you to host local LLMs on your computer. I figured out how to make it talk to Python. That's a challenge. You can talk to me about it afterward on Slack. And tested various models by iterating a prompt through a directory, writing results to a CSV. The laptop I am using is a bit older, but does have 64 gigabytes of RAM, which is a disclaimer for this talk. We did our tests over the summer using Qwen 2.5 and 3 and Mistral Small 3 vision models. To perform them, I downloaded a set of images from a variety of our digital collections, which ranged from lantern slides to political cartoons to fire insurance maps. Ran them through prompts, compared output times, prompts to each other, and basically, Mistral took about twice as long to run and did not give better results, so it got shoved out. Going forward, we are anticipating trying this project with Qwen 2.5 model. It's not overly resource intensive, and in a land of black box tools, if you ask it for 100 characters or less of alt text, it gives you 100 characters or less of alt text. So mix it up with a dog picture. That brings us to the Qwen 3 family, which I want to just share this as an example of why working with these tools can be challenging, because when they introduced it, it's supposed to be going from perception to deeper cognition and reasoning and execution. And so instead of dog wearing bandana standing in front of a Christmas tree, you get that giant block of text, and then if you upgrade to 3.5, you get something really unhinged that I'll put in the Slack later. This is my young silver pit bull wearing a festive bandana sitting politely in front of a Christmas tree is how I would describe this. So I tried a few things, but overall, Qwen 2.5 was a good balance of did what we asked it to do and not overly engineered. It's worth noting that it's developed by Alibaba, which is basically Chinese Amazon, from e-commerce to servers. So in terms of ethics, it runs on my computer and uses comparatively little power, but we're not pretending it's like a fully ethical model. And then finally, from the technology side, in terms of fine-tuning, you can get really nuanced with these, but while we have a lot of images to get through, they all come from very different contexts. So we don't think that fine-tuning has a good ROI. It requires a lot of specialized knowledge, so we're looking at fine-tuning the prompts instead.
So coming back to figuring out when and how to moderate AI-generated alt text, we needed a plan to test it. And to do that, we needed to be able to compare it to standards And we also needed to be able to compare it with human written alt text. And we already had a digital collection we could use for this experiment. And I did these out of order. So that project is the Judy Chicago Research Portal, which brings together about 2,600 images from 5 partner institutions. Penn State is one of them. And it's works of art in multiple media, many of them very abstract, and photos of installations, archival documents. So it seemed like it would be a good test. Most of all, it already has human-created alt text. So going back to the standards, we had developed an in-house guide for writing alt text. If you go look at this, you will see that it pulls a lot of examples from Cooper Hewitt Museum that we decided not to use, but we do want to still consider in the future. But in the meantime, we had something that we felt did the best that we could to prioritize the people who needed alt text, because if you've looked at alt text out in the wild, you can see people are using it for all kinds of other reasons as well. But we also needed to acknowledge that some context is needed at times, especially when you're dealing with abstract art. And that while our guidelines talk about not making assumptions, there may need to be some exceptions for particular collections. So some results. And for the sake of time, I will be skipping a few, but you'll see the full set on our slides online. So we ran for this presentation just 25 images, and 10 of them were pretty good. 3 were actually kind of better, and 8 had mixed results, and 4 were just weird. So one of the pretty good ones is this close-up of embroidery of aquatic animals. That's the human-written alt text. AI came up with embroidered design featuring a blue background with fish, jellyfish, and coral. So a little bit more detail. And they both noticed that it was embroidered. I'm going to skip this one. This one was especially interesting to me because given the rest of the items that the person doing the human written alt text, you can understand why they came up with sitemap printed in black and red on white paper. Text appears in small boxes with lines to other boxes, also features handwritten notes in black ink. But it was harder for her to read, and I'm sure it's even harder for you to read on this screen. So what the AI came up with is a handwritten diagram with flowcharts, text boxes, and arrows detailing a project structure and lesson plans, which really gets to the point that this is a lesson plan with lots of handwritten annotations. That was supposed to be a hidden slide. But we ended up with some that were missing the context. In this case, the human came up with a drawing of a black and red cursive S decorated with a flaring leaf-like shape. And the collection includes a lot of these studies for a particular letter. So it made sense within that context to assume this was an S. But the AI came up with abstract artwork with red, black, and white curved shapes on a white background, which, not bad, but it does miss the fact that it was meant to represent an S. I'm going to skip to this one because it was especially interesting. It's a banner. The human written text is gold textile with handwritten text in the center, flanked on the other side by a green figure pressing their hands together and an orange figure using a cane. And AI said it's a silhouette of a seated figure with a cane, holding hands with another figure against a gold background with text reading, "Would old women be revered?" So it gets some of it, but it gets some of it flat out wrong. And as Ruth pointed out, it's such a perfect example of the kind of thing where at first you might think it's right. And if you're skimming through while reviewing this and don't look closely, it could be passed on as, yes, this is correct, but it gets things that are significantly wrong. The one person being reverential is part of the context, and that is interpreted as a seated person, also wrong person's holding the cane. So the questions that we now have for the next steps is we will be running the rest of the 2,600 images, and we're going to see how they work, and then we're going to use that to get a sense of when does it make sense to use the generated text, when does it not, and for what reasons. And that way we can categorize things when they need human review and how much. And then we're going to apply it to our collections as a whole.
Okay. So if this is implemented, we already started thinking about our workflow. So the Preservation, Conservation, and Digitization Department, which I am part of at our institute,
All right, we'll hand off to you folks, and then are hopefully troubleshooting the live stream audio.
Ooh, yikes. Okay. Hi, everybody. How's my audio right now for people that I'm looking at? Thumbs up. Okay. Not too loud? Not too quiet? All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us to Code4Lib. This talk is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark Mode. I'm Robin Davis.
And I'm Meredith Wynn.
And we are coming to you from North Carolina State University Libraries in Raleigh. A few quick facts so you know the context in which this work has taken place. We're an academic library. We have a whole department for user experience. It has 8 people in it, including 2 full-time web developers, one of whom is Meredith. Our website really received over 3 million views last year, and our campus has over 40,000 students on it. Oh, and I should also mention you can view our slides on Zenodo, but also at go.ncsu.edu/dark. So, spoiler alert, here's what dark mode looks like on our library website. On the left, you can see our homepage and the default mode, light mode, which is a light color palette. Notice how blindingly bright that white is. So we usually have black or red text on that bright white background. But on the right, that's our homepage in the new dark mode. So it's got a very dark gray background, and the text is white or light red on top.
So if you happen to catch Robin and I's talk at Code4Lib 2024, you'll already know that we at NC State Libraries have been working on many different ways to give our users more control over our website's appearance. This is a universal design principle that just lets us accommodate a broader spectrum of users. So as a quick example, while this default display of a web page about a library renovation might be totally fine for a lot of users, there might be some users who find it easier to read this when it's presented with a warmer background. So as we shared in our previous talk, we've already implemented a readability widget that put more control over our site's appearance into users' hands. This is all part of the scary story. So because of this interest in giving users control over our website's appearance, of course, dark mode is part of that. So implementing dark mode has been on our wish list for a while. It just never felt urgent. I mean, after all, it's not like we have all these users clamoring for dark mode, right?
This brings us to scary story number 1. Some of our users crave the darkness, and their numbers are greater than we ever dared imagine. Which is to say, 38% of our users have their operating system appearance set to dark mode. That's actually double what I would have guessed. We use Matomo for our web analytics tracking platform, and we set up custom event tracking to track which color scheme their OS is set to prefer.
So now we have this scary evidence that actually a big chunk of our users want dark mode and we are not giving it to them. So how do we fix this? How do we implement dark mode on our website? Well, we have a small team in UX that we call the Web Styling Task Force. We meet regularly and we've been working on standardizing styling across our site for a while now. So implementing dark mode was a pretty natural next project for this group. We first agreed on scope. We decided to just focus on what we owned on our website, which is the Drupal part of the website for now. And then once we feel totally confident about dark mode, we will expand out to other apps at the libraries and offer our code to other developers.
The first step was, in my opinion, the most fun one, coming up with a color palette. Our University Communications Office provides an expanded palette of brand colors, including our main brand color, Wolfpack Red, and other ones like Hunt Yellow, which is named for our famously yellow staircases at the Hunt Library. The comms office also provided an even larger palette of tints and shades, which we used to determine the colors that we'd used for text against a dark gray background, that's the second row that you see there, and dimmed background colors to use with white text. That's the third row of colors that you see there. It's critical to ensure adequate color contrast so that our site remains accessible. So we checked every color combo, like light yellow a text against a dark gray background, to make sure it passes the contrast ratio set by the WCAG AA guidelines.
Scary story number 2. We have our color palette, and even with our limited scope, we created a terrifying amount of work for ourselves. Implementation for this one was pretty scary. We have a really big website with lots of old legacy content. We got hundreds of SAS files that we needed to update to use this new color palette that Robin just talked about. Now, CSS does actually have a light-dark color function that targets a user's OS setting. So if your operating system is set to regular or light mode, the colors will be set to the first argument in the function. And if it's set to dark mode, the color will be set to the second argument. So just as a very simple example, this CSS will set the paragraph element to be black text against a white background in light mode and white text against a black background in dark mode. Of course, there's also a media query for detecting the same OS setting. So this CSS does the exact same thing as the previous example, but as you can see, using that media query requires double the amount of CSS. So wherever possible, we just use that light-dark function. Using SAS, we can set variables that will automatically select the lighter or darker tints from the color palette Robin showed. So everywhere we use this light gray variable, we can trust that it will be correct based on the user's OS setting. We also use Foundation, so we can set Foundation's theme colors to use our color palette as well. And again, that means that we can do things like set all of our anchor links text colors to that primary color variable without having to worry about dark mode, since the primary color variable was set using the light-dark function. Everything I just talked about was a really huge help in reducing the amount of styles we had to change in order to get our site's colors looking good in dark mode. But obviously there's other things you might want to change in dark mode besides just the colors. So you might want to write a little JavaScript snippet like we have here, and this just manually checks the color scheme both on page load and if the user changes their OS settings in the middle of a session. And that set color preference function that you see referenced there just adds an attribute to the body element of the HTML. That allowed us to do things the light-dark function just can't handle, like setting the opacity for the hero image on our homepage so it dims a little in dark mode. And just a heads up that the light-dark function isn't supported in some older versions of browsers, so definitely check what your users are using, and you might want to include a fallback. We have to give a really big shout out to our senior developer on the team, Eric Olson. He was responsible for the lion's share of this implementation. And he doesn't love presenting, but I feel like this screenshot of one of his many commit messages for this project does a pretty good job of communicating his efforts on this. So kudos to Eric for doing so much work to ensure that this scary story had a happy ending.
This brings us to scary story number 3. We summoned dark mode into existence, but would the users embrace it or flee in terror? Oh my God. Amazing. Thank you, Dre, for that incredible evil laugh. So it was time for usability testing. Before we launched it, we really wanted to test it with real users. So our research questions included, can users still do everything on our website that they need to? What's the experience going from our main website, which is in Drupal in dark mode, to another library's application that does not have dark mode, like our catalog? And do users who have dark mode turned on in their OS actually want our website to be in dark mode? So we set up a table in the library lobby for a couple of hours, the thing we call Tiny Cafe. Probably a lot of you have something similar at your institutions too that you do for really quick answers and lots of feedback from users. So we asked passersby to give us 5 minutes of feedback in exchange for little 3D printed trinkets and stickers. People will do anything for a sticker. That's my #1 user research tip. So we do this kind of user research pretty often, and it was really helpful in this project too. So how did participants respond to our website in dark mode? 10 out of our 16 users had a positive reaction, 3 had a neutral reaction, and 3 had a negative reaction. Positive comments included, I like it, it's eye-catching, and dark mode is a good thing, all the apps on my phone are in dark mode. Some negative comments included, I don't like the color combination, black and red aren't for everybody, and it's darker than I'm used to, it's a little weird for me. One participant mentioned that although they prefer dark mode, they still wanted to be able to manually toggle back and forth. So that's something that we are planning to do in the future. Over and over again, we heard this feedback from participants. It's easier on the eyes. That was exactly what we were aiming for. One of the personas that we had in mind was a student staying up late, studying at 3 a.m. in a dark room. Our website in dark mode is much easier on their eyes than our bright white default website would be.
Along with that user testing, we did a bunch of internal testing ourselves before we launched. So once we had incorporated user feedback into the dark mode version we had on a development server, it was time for a big old spreadsheet of links to test, which can also be a little scary. So we, along with other colleagues, checked dozens of representative web pages on our site for just any funkiness related to dark mode that we could find. Something we found really helpful for our testing, just in case you haven't spotted it before, Firefox's Developer Tools console includes these 2 little sun and moon icons, and those actually let you switch back and forth between light and dark mode at a click without actually changing your preferences in your operating system. So we found that really useful. Other things we found really important in testing were to ask people who aren't on the implementation team for their feedback, so people who haven't been staring at these colors in these pages for like months and months. Don't forget to test on mobile. It can be really nice to share your work with other developers at your institution, even if you're not asking them to implement it in their apps yet. It can just be nice to share. And of course, you gotta let the comms team know what's coming down the pike. You also want to make sure that you are testing after launch as well, because even with all that pre-launch testing I talked about, we still found some errors after we launched.
So we launched this just this past September. We immediately got some feedback from our colleagues, including this delightful email. Not to yell in your inbox, but yes, 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 yay, this is amazing. Y'all deserve all the flowers. This is life-changing for me. Ha ha. That made all the work worth it, let's be honest. Additionally, like Meredith said, we gave a heads up to our library's communications department so that they could share the good news too. So here's what they posted to Instagram. We asked and you responded. Turns out nearly 40% of you prefer dark mode, so we created that option for you. You will be served the version of our site that matches the settings on your phone or computer. Enjoy.
Up next, like Robin said earlier, we'd really love to incorporate a manual toggle, just in case, like she said, some users have that operating system preference, but it's not the same as what they want on our website. We definitely want to keep incorporating dark mode into new components and new styles and new features that we release. We would also love to work with other libraries teams, I'm staring at them in the audience right now, to launch dark mode in other libraries' applications. And there's another next step that's been proposed. What might be the scariest story of all, so stay tuned. What if we use custom CSS to apply dark mode to Primo? Thanks for listening to our scary stories, everyone. We hope they make you feel empowered to take on projects like this of your own. I think we have time for questions. A minute and a half, if there's any questions.
There's a question down in front here with a pink water bottle, if that helps.
Thank you. Hi, I really loved your presentation. I love user testing. Hello? Oh, so you said that 40% of your users prefer dark mode based on the OS settings on their laptop. You have a lot of students, so 40% is a big number, right? But was there ever I don't know, if there was only 20%, for example, would you still consider doing this? Or how did you guys decide, yes, 40% is enough? When you think about it, it's less than 50, so sometimes some people may think like, oh, that's not enough, but you have a really big student population. So if the percentage was different, would it change anything for you, or would this always have been a task?
That is such a great question. I don't think we had a figure in mind. I do know that when we saw 38%, all of us went, oh, wow. So that was a reaction that helped to spur the project.
Yeah, I agree with Robin. Like I said earlier, it's been on our wish list for a while. Like, we've known we should implement dark mode. That's the thing people want. But seeing that 38% number is what made us go, actually, we're doing that immediately, because 38%, like you said, is a really high number.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now for our ultimate talk of the day. We have, if I can find that schedule, making the library web design process more collaborative, a case study using Figma to develop strategy-focused web solutions. So we'll hand over to Tyrone. I assume you have a PowerPoint in here somewhere.
Hello, and thank you for joining this session, and thank you as well for the organizers of Code4Lib. My name is Tyrone Fontaine, and I make collaborative web pages at Cleveland Public Library. Today, I'll be walking through the method I use to translate intent into structure, which I call Gutenfig. A bit about me. I'm a UX web designer, and I focus on scalable web systems for public institutions, including international experience with both libraries and universities. I have a background in graphic design and motion graphics, and that informs how I approach UX, UI web design. When I first proposed this talk, it focused more on, lightweight design, a lightweight design library and connecting mockups to live data. But as that project evolved, something else became more important, reducing friction between design and implementation. And that's what led to Gutenfig. I just wanted to give a quick motion notice. This presentation includes a short video with sped up scrolling and interface movement. If you are sensitive to motion, feel free to look away during those segments. I'll note that when it is about to happen. So great documents don't automatically become great web pages. While clients are experts in their fields, they aren't necessarily experts in web design or UX UI. Even with the best intentions, if intent isn't carried through the web design process, strong outcomes are less likely. Sometimes page structure disappears between planning and WordPress, the gap between content and intention. While content is critical, without an innate understanding of functionality and workflow, there will be a disconnect. Clients can become frustrated, feeling as if their hard work, expertise, and planning have been ignored, when in reality, it's simply intention getting lost in translation. Throughout my work with public institutions across multiple countries, I've come to recognize that my graphic design background has uniquely shaped my ability to translate client intent into web design and code. In this sense, I've become a translator, moving content and intent into structured web layouts. My work in this role ultimately led me to develop an app to streamline and share this process. So here's what I've been thinking about: minimizing the friction that occurs when moving from Figma to Gutenberg, so clients feel confident that their prep work and content are implemented as intended. When we build web pages for public institutions, we consider design, functionality, ease of updates, and accessibility. One of the most important and often overlooked factors is attention to patterns. Patterns improve efficiency, reduce cognitive load, and help users quickly find what they need while keeping us aligned with the page's original intent. By agreeing on structure before building, clients feel included and essential to the process, leading to stronger ownership and greater satisfaction with the final outcome. Through pattern and recognition and client involvement, we reduce unnecessary rebuilding and unexpected changes. In doing so, we create a smoother workflow and reinforce trust in the process, along with clarity that the final result will accurately reflect their intent. What does this process actually look like? I think it's helpful to walk through an example to demonstrate its simplicity and effectiveness. When I first work with a client, they bring content organized in a way that makes the most sense to them. As with any new collaboration, a shift in process can take time, particularly as we learn to understand and trust one another's intent and abilities. This isn't something that can be refined in a single attempt. It's a practice, and it improves with each iteration. Once we establish a strong workflow in the first session, meetings that follow become significantly smoother as each team member understands their role and how the process works. This is the sequence we aim to follow every time. It starts with review, pattern, flow, and publish, and then as we sort of meet more and more, clients sort of understand the process of patterns, and then it's just review, flow, and publish. Once our content is secured and communication is clear, we move to Gutenfig. Gutenfig is the part I'm the most proud of. It's been tested, refined, and reduced to just a few steps. Step 1 is appending WordPress block markup to our Figma components. This is the initial setup. It happens once when the plugin is installed. After that, you simply drag components onto the page like you normally would. It follows the swallow the frog principle. Tackle the hardest part first. Once that's done, everything else becomes simple. Once Gutenfig is set up, the rest is pretty straightforward. You simply highlight your Figma components and copy them to your clipboard. The final step is to navigate to your page and paste the entire layout. It's as simple as copy and paste, with no new code or keyboard shortcuts to learn. Up next is the 90-second sped-up walkthrough of the full Gutenberg workflow. You'll see 4 phases: reviewing content, building patterns in Figma, refining the layout, and copying the finished layout directly into WordPress. There's no audio. So this walkthrough shows the full 4-phase process in action. The first is long-form content that we review together, and I'll usually suggest WordPress block types, and we'll extract that from their long-form copy. Then the block types are mapped to, sorry, this is me explaining the block still a little bit. From there, I'll sort of explain a little bit about Figma, what it is, and then I'll show them sort of how quickly we can sort of pull a page together. Here's me demonstrating how easy the blocks are to drag around, and then I'll show them the blocks that we use. The next step is we'll work through all of their suggested blocks, and we'll drag all the components onto a page. This is a back and forth of us looking at their content and then building out the page together. Once the page is built, the last step is to open up Gutenfig, and then all you have to do is copy it to your clipboard, and then you go into WordPress, and then you hit paste. And then the layout is just there immediately. So that's the Gutenfig method. It's clear, collaborative, and repeatable. It brings human communication and intent back into the web design process, helping ensure the original goals are preserved while supporting the library's mission to provide access to knowledge with ease. Once this is set up, something else happens. Your pages start to accumulate as reusable, accessible layouts. A landing page becomes something you can copy and paste. A featured content layout becomes something you can reuse across departments. You're not rebuilding a structure, you're reusing it. And because those patterns are consistent, you can begin to test and refine them with intentionality. Does anybody have any questions? Cool. Oh, yep.
Hi, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that was loud. Thank you so much. First of all, I love the name Gutenfig. That's so fun to say. But second of all, I just want to ask, are there any errors, bugs, or unexpected features that you've had to deal with? And if so, what are they and how have you had to deal with them?
It took a long time to work through because I had never even used the plugin component in Figma. So I had to work with our team lead. His name is Will Scora over at the Cleveland Library, and he did a lot of that programming for us. So I mostly was just like, it doesn't work. Can you take a look at it? And then he was like, yeah, sure, here it is. Sorry, I can't really speak too much to that specific part of it. Yep. Thank you for having me. If you'd like to be notified when this is published, please email me at tyrone.fontaine@cpl.org. And in the spirit of libraries and public knowledge, I will be releasing this plugin as open source, making it freely accessible to all. This presentation and the work behind this plugin were made possible by the Cleveland Public Library. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyrone. And that is it for talks today. I just have to give you guys a few announcements before you can stop ever having to deal with my terrible speaking voice and let you guys enjoy your evening. Buried somewhere in here is a link to our newcomer dinner. So, it's really annoying. So somebody should drop that in the Slack channel because I am not going to read a very long string of random characters for you. So if you haven't signed up for newcomer dinner, please use the QR code or the Slack, or just talk to somebody here and organize dinner yourself. But there's a lot of good options. So we have that going on this evening. As well, one other thing this evening is it happens to be the Jewish holiday of Purim. And Jonathan Rockkind is organizing some folks to go celebrate at a local synagogue, so talk with him about that. If you are speaking tomorrow in the morning, try to come up here between 8 and 8:45 to get your presentation loaded on the computer and ready to go. We're starting at 9, not 9:30 tomorrow, so it's an earlier morning. Everybody be ready to roll for that. A few other events coming up just to keep on the radar. There is the reception tomorrow evening. That's a pay your own way. Sort of optional. We also have game night that is going to be starting between 6:30 and 7. Some of us will be here a little earlier than that. So if you have brought games, if you're local and want to bring games in, if you want to go out to a game shop and buy games and come join us, there's that. But there's also a lot of other do-it-yourself events that is posted online. There is also going to be Code4Lib on Wednesday morning at 7, starting out in the lobby. But again, there's plenty of opportunities. Feel free to mingle with folks and just meet new friends, meet old friends. It's a great time. Everyone here is great people, so do enjoy yourself. Though introverts, do take your time to get yourself recharged as well, but we would like to hang out with you. And also remember for tomorrow morning to have your badge and your lanyard. So make sure to put that somewhere where you won't forget it in the morning. Otherwise, you are free. Go enjoy newcomer dinner and any other social things that you want to do this evening.